Wish my voice was better for this, but today we will be reading Confucianism, A Modern Interpretation by Chang Shi. This was from Orion Lee, professor, masters within Confucianism. Yeah, apparently he helped this guy write this story, the book, and by showing on webcam, I just want to audio reading, and just in case the volume is too loud, drop it down a little. Just want music to helps me focus. So I have a problem. So as we open up the book, this one is from 1980 by the China Academy. All rights reserved. It's for a price of 600 NT, 17 US dollars. You can find the book on Amazon, other places. I put in the title. Not sure how those versions are, but I tried to put the best one I could. And Huakang Yamingsan, I think Yamingsan is a mountain. Taipei, Taiwan, Republic of China. So, not too familiar with the backgrounds of how this all got together, but let's get to the point. And there's a portrait of Confucius drawn by Wu Chengyin, by that name. And now we start with the foreword. I dedicate this book to the youth in China and elsewhere. They deserve more comprehensive information about the precepts of Confucius than is available so far. There are scholarly works by sinologues, each covering one or several aspects of Confucianism. A survey in more general terms like this one may perhaps fill a need. The Chinese original of this book has been received with enthusiasm. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaya. Friends well versed in the Korean and Japanese languages are engaged in translating it. This English version painstakingly undertaken by Professor Orion Lee, I am sure will enrich the young people in the West with the wisdom of our sage. And by sage, they mean Confucius. October 31st, 1980. Chang Chians. And then we have Chapter 1, Confucius was great. And it talks about his great personality, his humanism, his the first democratic educator, and accomplished philosophical man. Inauguration of a new era, the four steps, aim at the Tao, build up a base with virtue, rely on Jin, relax in the arts, man's mind, nature, and sentiments, learning, knowledge, intuition, action, have a sincere will, happiness in the Tao, the middle way, to be a sage inside and a king outside. People are masters. Confucianism and the idea of revolution, great harmony, lineage of Confucianism, a Confucianist century for the world. That's on page 60, apparently. And then chapter 2, philosophy of life. I'm not going to go over everything because we're going to get to it eventually. Then we have chapter 3, philosophy of education. Chapter 4, political philosophy. Chapter 5, philosophy of law. That's hitting page 2197. And then chapter 6 is philosophy of art. Philosophy of change in history is chapter 7. Chapter 8, we have military philosophy. From pages 289 all the way to 308. Chapter 9 is religious philosophy. And we have chapter 10, which is talking about the model types of men by Confucian standards. Chapter 11, the disciples of Confucius. Chapter 12 is about the Confucianist lineage. Chapter 13, classics and memorials. Chapter 14 is Confucianism in Eastern nations. Chapter 15 is Confucian studies in Western countries. Chapter 16 is about the period of the Changchui. I don't know how to say that. A general survey. And that goes from pages 537 to 570, and 570 should be the last. So now we begin, and let's take a drink of water real quick. Important thing about talking a lot is you need to hydrate. Anyways, like the five other, sorry. Confucius was great. Chapter 1. A. His great personality. Like the five other spiritual leaders in the world, Confucius still lives among us and is admired more than ever. He absorbed China's cultural traditions accumulated during the 25 centuries before his time. They were rich but somewhat schematic. He coordinated them, reorganized them, evaluated them, and developed them into a profound new system of ethics and political philosophy for the benefit of posterity, thus providing a solid foundation for national existence during the 25 centuries after him. His expertise as one of the top thinkers and educators that mankind has ever produced is fully shown in the Analects dialogues recorded by his disciples. He appears there to the surprise of some of us as a plain man with plain words and plain deeds quite within the reach of anybody who has a desire to learn from his example. A fact which explains eloquently why his teachings constituted the mainstream of Chinese thought for over 25 centuries till the present day. He has actually personified the cultural characteristics, the aspirations, and the ideals of the average Chinese, so much so that to understand him is to understand China, Chinese and Chinese history. Every Chinese can be proud to have had among his fellow citizens a man with so monumentary an achievement, so magnificent and immortal a personality, and so much dedication to his self-imposed mission. I am therefore including in my 5,000 years of Chinese history, italicized, a special study on Confucianism, a modern interpretation, as one of the 3 volumes of on Middle Zhou period 770 to 479 BC. The other two being a biography of Confucius and a general history of that period. I hope my young readers in China and elsewhere will acquire hereby a thorough comprehension of the origins and trends of our culture as well as its far reaching, but often hidden significance. I am performing in the meantime my homage to this most outstanding man whose place in the history of China and Chinese thought is so focal, so unique, and may I say, so absolutely prominent. For having continued the lineage of hundreds of kings and sages, synthesized their accomplishments, and passed on to us a Tao, all his own, consistent with itself, impressive in scope, serious in substance, and splendid in style. Alright, we're at 11 minutes in the stream. B. His humanism. Confucianism, from its roots to its branches and leaves, is dedicated to the study of man. Man is its ultimate, highest, and most direct aim. It tries to find truth through man's daily activities and apply its findings to build up man's character, uphold man's rights, develop man's potentials, and unfold man's nature. It is a kind of humanism and has this in common with humanism in the West. It sees in the fulfillment of the individual the hope for civilization. Confucius affirmed at the very beginning of his career that man was the noblest being in the universe, the only being with a consciousness of himself, hence capacity for self-improvement and perfection. Well, obviously, modern day is different, but, it was interpretation back then. This is written in the 80s. If you know, you know. His philosophy may be summed up in one word: Jin. Jin, in his opinion, was the basis for all human relationships. It is written with 2 components, and the symbol for man on the left and the symbol for seeds on the right, which is like a, how do we do this? Let's use my mouse. So it's like this, and then it goes down like that. And then it has like 2 lines right here, separate. And then it has one like this, and it goes down that way. And then it goes line, and then line. So it's like a box with like, whatever. Put together, the 2 components mean the essence of man. To be Jen said, how do you say that? Susi? I don't know. Social name of Kongqi. Kongqi, 483 to 402 BC, is to be the man. This word, Jen, had been used by some moralists before Confucius to denote kindness as one of the many virtues, Confucius decided to use it as the highest of all the virtues, while retaining its time honored meaning of kindness. As the highest of all the virtues, Jen requires a man to be 100% a man, a complete man, a true man, a real man, in other words, a perfect man. Uh oh, we got ads. Take a look. We gotta appreciate the website for the music, anyways. Alright. Where was I before I was rudely interrupted? Retaining. Confucius decided to use it as the highest of all the virtues while retaining its time honored meaning of kindness. As the highest of all the virtues, Jen requires a man to be 100% a man, a complete man, a true man, a real man. In other words, a perfect man. No more than 6 persons in the past were mentioned in the Analects as deserving to be called Gen men. Among the students of Confucius, only one made the grade for a period of 3 months. He was Yen Hui. Another one, Zhongkung, Chungkung, a space in between the K and the G, was considered quite Gen by the end observer. Confucius did not express his agreement or disagreement to the observer's conclusion. As kindness, one of the many virtues, Confucius defined it in the following way when asked by Fan Shi Zhu. A Gen man loves people. In most cases, Confucius would use the word Gen to mean 100% of a man. He had a humanist reason, which was revealed to us by Tzeze, Tzesse, the Chongyong. Man ought to behave according to his own nature, because the nature of his has been bestowed by heaven, and it partakes the Tao of heaven. That which heaven has ordained is called man's nature. To follow nature is to conform to the Tao. Get back to the Tao after straying away from it is what we call education. Confucius was, more than anything else, a great educator. The purpose he had when he was urging people to try to be Jen was simply to get them back to the Tao. Dr. John C.H. Wu made an excellent comment on this passage written by Kung Chi. It suggests to us the picture of a big tree, Dr. Wu said, with heaven's commands as its roots, with the Tao as its trunk, with culture and education as its branches, leaves, and flowers. The fruits of this tree are a beautiful personality for the individual, a good government for the state, peace for the world, and happiness for all mankind. Society is going to evolve into the stages of Shao Kang, limited bliss, and Tatong, great harmony. Now, real quick, the Great Harmony, from what I remember reading during my last years of reading this long ago, in probably 2015 or 16, I got to page 300. But what I'm trying to say here is the Great Harmony. When we get to that part, keep your ears peeled. All right. Let me add here that the Tao and the terminology of Confucius, as understood so correctly by I'm just gonna say T. Just gonna call him T, just for the sake of time, and paraphrased so impressively by Dr. Wu, is quite different from the Tao of Lao Tzu and his Taoist. Is it Taoist? I don't know. And the humanism of Confucius, despite its similarity with Western humanism in certain aspects, does not ignore the role of heaven or God, or separate heaven from man. Water break? Sometimes I have to narrate myself to do things. It's a complicated history. C. First democratic educator. A firm believer in the perfectibility of man. Of all men, Confucius took it upon himself to give the common people a chance to share the knowledge which, until then, had been a monopoly of the nobility. The schools where the 6 arts were taught were open to the sons of the nobles only. Confucius started a school of his own for everybody, whatever the blood. The 6 arts were 1. The Li, a collective name for the ritual, etiquette, and administrative law. 2. Music. 3. Archery. 4. Chariot and carriage driving. 5. Writing. 6. Mathematics. Confucius in his school taught more than these 6 arts. He acquainted his students with the annuals. They forget to put a U there? The records of oracles, the songbooks, and a number of historical documents, which he had copied from the originals stored up in the temples, archives, and offices of the government. After using these materials as textbooks in his classes and making corrections and commitments or comments from time to time, he finally put them in book form, totaling 6 volumes: 1 book of songs, 2 book of music, 3 book of documents, 4 book of the Li, and that's probably gonna second year. I don't want to get hit with a copyright for some dumb reason by some AI detection bot that doesn't even know what it's really doing. So, back to the copyright-free music. Alright. The 6 books known as the 6... Wait, did I skip something? Book of Change, number 5. Book of Li, 4. Based on the records of oracles, and 6 the Chunchi revised edition annuals of... Okay. The 6 books, known as the 6 classics, were later carried by his students to their homes in Lu and some other states. Each of them had made a copy from the teacher's manuscript. Their students and their friends also made copies. Before long, there were copies and copies of the 6 classics almost everywhere in China. Some of the copies finally found their way to foreign lands. It was Confucius, said Professor Chen Mu, who first in the world made the knowledge from the temples of the nobles a common property of the society as a whole. The books he edited and commented on had been official texts reserved for those who had positions in the governments of the feudal states or at the royal court of Luoyang. Through Confucius, such texts became accessible to the common people of many places, especially by the Chongchu. Oh my god. Which was the first work in history ever written by a man from among the people. Its appearance at the early date qualifies the Chinese as a historically minded nation, and Confucius may be considered as China's first and greatest historian. These 6 classics could and were going to exercise very salutary, like salute, but salutary influences on the people of every state. The Book of Songs, said Confucius, may make them gentle and forgiving. The Book of Music, broad-minded and flexible. The Book of the Li, respectful and serene. The Book of Documents, far-sighted and understanding. The Book of Change, calm and with a penetrating insight. The Chonchi, fluent in speech and style, able to put things together and see the point. Professor Liu Yiqing, in his Essence of Our flipping page, National History, I thought I was going to say nation, indicated that Confucius did not praise the 6 classics for their elegance and erudition, but merely emphasized their possible influences on the people. Professor Liu reminded the historians of our time to bear this in mind and do their best to remain fair and objective. Now, forgive me, but I need some oxygen. Ooh, that was a good one. Alright, back to it. The private school run by Confucius for almost a half century till the end of his life in 479 BC, except during the years he was away from Lu, from 496 to 483 BC, was in fact more than a school. It was the center of propagation of a new culture, with around 3,000 students in and out. They came from all parts of Lu and from many of the neighboring states. 72 among them attended the lectures and did the homework regularly. Regularly. Oh my god, we're not gonna figure that out. And graduated with specialized attainments and skills. A dozen or so did postgraduate study and accompanied the teacher till the end of his life, while making their own living in various fields. Confucius was involved in politics while carrying on his educator's activities. The politicians never gave him a wholehearted support. Had they given him such support, however, he might have had no time to edit the 6 classics and teach so many students. Consequently, China would have been deprived of the nucleus of her culture. His political failure, said Wang Kaitsu, of the Song period, was really a blessing for the Chinese people. That's interesting. I mean, there are people who have told me that it's not. There's parts of Confucianism that it's hard to agree with. Sometimes I feel this way too, but until I finish reading this book, I don't know. The Chinese people of successive ages have honored Confucius with many posthumous titles, of which the most appropriate, in my opinion, is this great synthesizer. Mostly sagely sage and revered teacher, he certainly was most sagely and deserved more than anybody else our reverence. But he was first of all a great synthesizer, having synthesized the cream of ancient Chinese culture and turned it into a spiritual legacy shared by all Chinese and mankind. We are on page 7 now. D. An accomplished philosophical man. The title Confucius gave himself a few days before his death was a philosophical man. He was taking a walk in one of the public places in the city of Chufu, capital of Lu, when he uttered after a sigh, "A philosophical man is withering like a plant." A philosophical man, in his language, was not a philosopher in the modern sense, but a man with the virtues befitting a man and a wise understanding of life. He knew there was a beginning and an end to everything, and life was no exception. Life had to end sometime, somehow. For a philosophical man, death was as natural as birth. What mattered to a man with a purpose was how much he had accomplished towards that purpose. That's what keeps me up at night. That's not a joke. The purpose Confucius had was to reach the Tao, on which he spent his entire life. He used to say to his students, "If I could have the opportunity to hear the Tao and understand it and get into it, some morning I would die happily in the evening of the same day." This Tao he found it in the oracles recorded in the Book of Change. Nobody had ever studied them as seriously as he did, especially during the last years of his life. He was intrigued by these oracles and by the arrangements of the 6 solid and broken lines in each of the 64 hexagrams which accompanied these oracles, the solid lines representing the positive element and the broken lines representing the negative element. He discovered in them the cycles of the movements of heaven and earth, with man occupying a central position in these movements. The philosophy which Confucius succeeded in elaborating from his lifelong study of the Book of Change was not a cosmology with heaven as its object, nor an interpretation of history with earth or geography as the key. Yet it did not rule out the roles of heaven and earth, nor did it isolate man in the sage's system, for man formed a trio of heaven and earth. Confucius bequeathed us a wealth of wisdom, full of inspiration and hope. The two elements, positive and negative, were opposites, not enemies. They were not contradictory to each other, but tend to compensate for each other. And man's efforts, despite occasional difficulties, would lead to some goal, all being a matter of choice, determination, and perseverance. In one word, the Confucian philosophy is an optimist philosophy. It has served the Chinese people well throughout the many crises in their national life, such as earthquakes, droughts, floods, famines, epidemics, rebellions, civil wars, and foreign invasions. We're gonna take a small break here for a good 15 seconds. Okay. Inauguration of a new era. E. That's the letter for this part. The last 25 centuries in China may be called the Confucianist era. It has been very different from the feudal era before it. Society is no longer stratified into classes, and everybody has freedom. The Chinese owe much of this freedom to Confucius because he was the first man who gave education to the common people, thus promoting social equality. It was he, too, who actually and literally advocated a kind of republican government for China by praising constantly Emperors Yao and Shun, Shuen. Though these two emperors, unlike the other rulers in Chinese history, did not pass on their thrones to their own sons, but preferred to let the two best candidates in the country to take over. The lofty ideals of Confucius went even further. He urged his disciples to establish a paradise on earth, a welfare state, covering the whole world, much beyond the utopian dreams of the liberals of our time. That's funny. When the Great Tao gets applied, he said, the whole world will become a common property shared by all. People will elect the virtuous and employ the capable, make themselves trustworthy, and live with their neighbors in peace. They will cherish not only their own parents and children, but also the parents and children of others. Every old person will be cared for. Every adult will have a job. Every boy and girl and every child will be fed and educated. All the widows, widowers, persons who are alone in the world without a family, and persons who are disabled will get enough support to live. Every man will have a place in society, and every woman will have a home. Nobody will want to hide away his treasures, but would gladly offer them to the public. And nobody will want to stay idle, but would like to do his utmost for the public. Strategy, tactics, and intrigues lose their usefulness and are forgotten. Robbers, thieves, and rebels vanish into oblivion. No family has to close the doors of its house day or night. There you have a new world, which we may call the Tatong, the world of great harmony. That's one of my favorite parts of this. And personally, I think I took that to heart back when I read it, but I can understand that his ideal world, it seems pretty impossible in today's day and age. Maybe even back then, but hey man, the dude had a dream. It's like Martin Luther King, I feel. And many other people. Probably JFK to who knows who. This ideal about a world of great harmony, also, they call Confucius in the West Asian Jesus, apparently, so it's kind of funny. They have similar values and principles. The ideal about a world of great harmony and his other teaching have been a motivating force to many statesmen, scholars, and authors in various stages of Chinese history, and especially the reformists and revolutionists such as Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Why am I talking like this? Who founded the Republic of China in 1911. Dr. Sun said he always wanted to be a spiritual successor to Confucius. The official in charge of Yi, a border town of the Marquisate, I don't know, of Wei near the Duchy of Song, asked for an interview with Confucius when the latter traveled through the town with some of his disciples. The interview was granted. Afterwards, the official had a chat with the disciples and told them, you, young people, do not have to worry about the future. The world has been away from the Tao too long. Heaven is going to use your teacher as the holder of the Moto. That is, heaven has assigned a mission for him, the mission of waking the people up to the Tao. The four steps. F. There is a passage in the Analects in which Confucius is recorded as having said, aim at the Tao, build a base with virtue, rely on Jen, and relax in the arts. It is a very important passage showing us the four steps for self improvement, which are also the four main items of the teachings of Confucius, covering the totality of Confucianism. We ought to follow these four steps one by one without skipping any one of them, or doing two or three of them at the same time. In other words, we should set our aim at the Tao first and build up a base for further action by practicing virtue. Later, we may rely on Jen. Finally, we can relax in the arts. Excuse me, get a break. Now we continue. G. Aim at the Tao. To set one's aim on something is a prerequisite for any endeavor. A man without an aim is liable to give up easily or slow down after a few days of trying. Confucius had made up his mind to aim at learning when he was only 15 years old. He wanted to learn. What did he want to learn? The six arts, of course, and all of that beyond the six arts which challenged his curiosity. Later, when he grew older, he decided to learn as much as he could about the Tao and reach it. Mencius, one of his fifth generation disciples and the most active, was asked one day by an admirer, "What does a scholar do?" Mencius asked, "The scholar does whatever is connected with his aim. The best aim a scholar could set for himself is the Tao," an opinion which Mencius shared with Confucius and a great number of Confucianists in post-Zhou periods. The Tao to be aimed at is something which transcends. Just make sure my mic's on. Sometimes I forget. Which transcends time and space. It includes heaven, man, and earth, with man in the center, like the middle line in each of the two trigrams in a hexagram. Man plays an active role, not a passive one. He makes his own choice and formulates his own destiny, thereby helping heaven and earth to fulfill the Tao. "It is man who can glorify the Tao," said Confucius. "The Tao cannot glorify man. The Tao is not heaven's Tao," said Xunzi, 313 to 238 BC. "Nor Earth's Tao. It is a Tao for a man to go by. It is a Tao which only a gentleman can describe." The word for Tao in Chinese is written with a symbol for a road and another symbol for a man's head. Two symbols suggest a road for man to go by, a way of life, a principle for man to live in accordance with, a path leading to truth. It is also comparable to a door. "Who can step out from his house," said Confucius, "without passing through the door?" The Tao in the system of Confucius is basically an ethical concept. It does have, however, a metaphysical tinge. It affirms the unity, or more strictly speaking, some intimate relationship between heaven's way and man's way, between mind and matter, and between knowledge and action. Between heaven's way and man's way, T in, or I'm just gonna say his name. I should. Sisi. I'm just gonna call him Sisi. And Chong Yang made a conclusive statement about man's nature and his origin in heaven. Some person who can speak Chinese probably like, "This guy doesn't know shit," and I'm like, "Bro, I'm ABC, bro." According to him, man is what heaven wants man to be. What man has to do then is to develop his heaven endowed nature, which is truthfulness. Man's way in reality is merely a part of heaven's way. Tzu Chan, a contemporary of Confucius, said something not exactly like Tzu's thesis, but equally illuminating. Heaven's way is far, but man's way is near. We might add, heaven's way cannot be known, but may be felt. It is never hard to follow heaven's hints. The heavenly bodies move regularly with strength, said Confucius in his commentary on the Book of Change. So man ought to keep on working with strength too. Between mind and matter, according to the Ta Shui, contributed to, where's it Shu? Oh well, it's Tahshuh. Attributed to Sang San, one of the youngest among the direct disciples of Confucius, the sage urged them to rectify the mind before going any further in their learning process, which is what I kind of did. I decided I need to fix my mind more because back then it was not in the right place still. And how back? Maybe 2017? The mind before going any further in their learning process. After having rectified the mind, they should tell themselves to have a sincere will. Then they might start contacting the matter, namely things. In other words, Confucius wanted his disciples to pay attention to the mind and the will before tackling matter. Did Confucius consider that mind and matter were two phases of the same thing? It was not in his habit to say it explicitly. He was positive, nevertheless. about the relationship between the Tao and the multitudes of things. Tao has no shape, he said in the commentary on the Book of Change. The multitudes of things have. What he meant was the difference between the Tao and the multitudes of things is just a question of shape. There is, in other words, no difference as to substance. We might put it in modern terms. The Tao is the being, and the things are its manifestations. Between knowledge and action, Confucius was a seeker after knowledge all his life, yet he attached much more importance to action. A man with vigorous action is almost a Gen man, he said. Wang Xiaozhen, from Master of Yang Ming, not Yao Ming, Yang Ming, 1472 to 1528, of the Ming period, considered knowledge as the beginning of action and action as the completion of knowledge. He also said knowledge without action is not true knowledge. What he had in mind was mainly ethics. If a man thinks, for instance, that he knows how important it is to be nice to his parents, yet he does nothing to make his parents happy, this man cannot be recognized as having really known the importance of being nice to the parents. So that's pretty interesting. H. Build up a base with virtue. The most sublime thing in the world is the Tao, said Zhou Tun 10117 to 1073. And the noblest thing is virtue. The Tao is an ideal. Virtue is working toward that ideal. So for myself, world peace is always something I'm working towards, even if I kind of give up sometimes. But something, it's like you gone so far into it, something you can't let go. Understand? I don't know. Whoever's listening to this, it's obviously hard to probably understand what I'm even talking about. But all you need to know is I am a poet, I am an aspiring novelist, and it is today is, what is today? 11th of 9th, the November 9th, 2024. This is part of my novel research, since in Shadows of God, I am going to be writing a character based on Confucius or Confucius. Most likely Confucius himself. Alright, so a Chinese word for virtue was written with two components, one representing the heart, the other representing straight. It meant straightforwardness and uprightness. The modern version of this word has a third component representing two men. It means when two men are together, each should be straight with the other. There is a homonym for virtue, which means gain. Both are pronounced te. This fact has led many scholars to define virtue as a moral gain. Virtue really is something to be gained, because the more a man practices virtue, the more he gains in character. Oh, I can attest to that. But while making new gains, he should not lose the old ones in the form of good habits. This is what Confucius had in mind when he advised his students to build up a base with. I want to break the book on accident. It's a really old book. Okay. With virtue. Is that what it says? Yeah. Second guess myself so much. He wanted them to hold on to what they had achieved, like the soldiers holding a base in the battlefield. The best of his students, Yan Hui, followed his instructions literally. Yan held on to a moral gain as soon as he made it, and held it so fast as if he were keeping it in his two clenched hands and hiding it inside his shirt. Virtue has to be cultivated and renewed every day. Otherwise, whatever has been gained would slip away, that is easily forgotten. Cultivate one's virtue, however, is hard work. Confucius himself admitted that even he often neglected to do it. To renew one's virtue, obviously, is harder still. If a man could do it every day, that is, have his virtuous conduct carried out with new vigor every day, he would be praised by Confucius as a man with splendid virtue. A virtuous man should keep on being virtuous all the time. No man can be called virtuous if he is so just for once, or for a day, or for a short period of time. He should be furthermore actively virtuous, not passively virtuous. In other words, he ought to take the initiative of being kind, friendly, helpful, sympathetic, altruistic whenever he is dealing with another person. And most important of all, he is not supposed to have the privilege of taking a rest in this matter. Look at the water in this stream. Confucius called some of his disciples to attention when they were standing on the banks of a certain river. See how it flows without stopping from day to night and from night to day. Unfortunately, few men know what virtue is, and fewer men can love virtue as much as they love beautiful women. On the other hand, it seems that everybody wants to be good, too. Here is where education comes in. Leaders in the society and the state have a duty to encourage the people to be good, develop their laudable inclinations, and assist them in correcting their wrong habits. The English word virtue is derived from the Latin word for man, vir. It has an etymological similarity with the Chinese word jin. Jin is the most important among all the virtues in the Confucian system, and sometimes it was used by Confucius as a collective name for all the virtues. Other virtues besides Jin, which have been mentioned in the Analects, may be grouped in the following way: loyalty and filial devotion. That's number one. Loyalty, empathy, straightforwardness, filial devotion, respect for the older brother and elders in general. Number two, gen and love. Gen, wisdom, courage, gentleness, goodness, tolerant, toleration, benevolence. Number three, trustworthiness and righteousness. Trustworthiness, righteousness, seriousness, thrift, earnestness, respectfulness, firmness, perseverance, reservedness, uprightness. Number four, peacefulness and calmness, politeness, humility, the disposition to yield precedence, power, or profit to others, moderation, or pride. The eight values in the headings of these four groups, which have been taken from a speech made by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, in which he said these eight virtues were the typical ones practiced by most of the Chinese. Some of the Chinese, unfortunately, do not measure up to the national standard. They not only bring shame to the name of the country, but have also caused a great deal of suffering to the masses on the mainland. The communists think, said Professor Chen Lifu, that material things are more important than men, and the capitalists think that wealth is more important than virtue. Both the communists and the capitalists are wrong. Oh man, that's pretty obvious. Among all the virtues, Jen is to be relied on. That's okay. My bad. This is section I. Rely on Jen. Among all the virtues, Jen is to be relied upon. It has priority, it is the starting point for the formation of character, and at the same time, the highest standard for human behavior. The word Jen appears in the Analects 97 times and is discussed 59 times. Confucius put the greatest emphasis on it because he considered it as the virtue to accompany a person all his life. In other words, this person has to rely on it all the time for whatever he thinks, whatever he does, and whatever he says. There are three aspects of Jen. When dealing with heaven, a man practicing Jen obeys it like he obeys his own father. When dealing with himself, he is loyal to himself. That is, he is honest and truthful with himself. When dealing with some other fellow, he treats this fellow like himself, doing nothing to this fellow which he does not like to be done to himself. The Jen of Confucius and the Confucianist is to be distinguished from the doctrine of Chen I of Mo Ti, 489 to 406 BC. So that guy lived a long time for back then, I feel. And the Maltesists both may be interpreted as brotherhood love, yet there is a great difference between them. Jen requires a man to love his parents and children more than the parents and children of other people, and reciprocate the kindness of another person in accordance with what this other person has done for him. A Moteist would treat all the other persons in the world on a same footing to the extent of ignoring that some of these persons happen to be his own parents or children. Diametrically opposite as their approaches are, the Confucianist and the Moteist have a common aim, a perfect world based on love. Confucianists radiate their love by degrees, but will eventually extend their love from those whom they have always loved to those whom they did not love at first. Their final goal being a world of great harmony, in which people cherish not only their own parents and children, but also the parents and children of others. Let us add, it is not the doctrine of Chin Ai of the Moteist which has formulated the Chinese national character. It is the Gen of the Confucianists and its corollary filial devotion, which has J. That's it. And then now we're on J, relax in the arts. The last of the four steps is relax in the arts. The arts is in question are the 6 arts taught in the government schools, which Confucius took it upon himself to let the sons of the common people share with the sons of nobility in his own private school. What did he mean by relax in? The Chinese original for these two English words is yu, like Y-I-U. It means to swim. So is it yo-yong? Because that's how you say swimming in Chinese. Like a fish. To swim like a fish. To go to places and have fun to play. Confucius wanted his students to tackle the 6 arts like a fish swimming in a stream, studying and learning in a leisurely manner. The answers to their own questions would come to them automatically after some time, like clean waters coming to the rice fields. When they had habituated themselves with the technique of these arts, they could play with these arts, in fact, as if they were washing their feet in the warm water of a spring. Tu Yu of the Jin period wrote an excellent description of this method of instruction used by Confucius. Among the 6 arts, the Li was the most important. The 5 other arts, namely music, archery, driving, writing, and mathematics, were useful too, but not as indispensable as the Li. For instance, an archer had to know the Li, such as what he should do when he started participating in a contest, but a specialist in the Li did not have to know archery. A knowledge of the Li is a prerequisite to a student in music, driving, writing, or mathematics in a similar manner as well as to a man aspiring to reach the Tao. What was the Li? It was many things put together, almost culture itself. It covered an individual's day-to-day. What? Day-to-day. Okay, yeah, I guess that's how it is. I don't know why I'm reading that. I'm probably tired. Movements, society, customs, and estates, institutions. I get tired when I read physical books. That's why I read digital all the time, but this is funny. I think it's something to do with a satisfaction of something. I don't know. And when I researched that in my psychology in the past, it's because reading leads to knowledge, and knowledge leads to survival. So it's like very psychological. Anyways, where was I? An individual must look decent, stand and walk in a gesture acceptable to others, talk in audible and comprehensible tones, do his chores to keep his house or room clean, yield precedence to the elders when getting in and out of the doors, carry on conversations with friends or strangers in a polite way. Without learning the Li, Confucius told his son Kong Li 532 to 483 BC, you would not know where and how to stand. There were, in the time of Confucius, ceremonies for putting on the hat. For some young man, a kind of initiation rite. For an archery contest, for drinking fiesta among fellow villagers, etc. There were also events similar to what we have today. Funerals, weddings, trips to the ancestors' tombs, or making offerings to the ancestors at the clan's temple or at one's own home. All such ceremonies and events were regulated by the Li. In the political field, what we understand as laws and regulations today were considered as parts of the Li. Administrative and judicial institutions, systems in education and land ownership, military structure, and diplomatic relationships were all governed by the Li. The importance of the Li can never be overstated. It was the demarcation DE demarcation between China and her barbarian neighbors, between civilization and savagery, between man and animal, or as Tu Antal had said, between a gentleman and a villain. The Li was the trunk of a state, in the opinion of Cole, a palace historian. At the royal court of Zhou, Tu Shu Shang, a statesman in the Marquis of Jin, it was a good vehicle for the government's policies. Zichan, the most influential man of Zhang, and earldom, went even further by saying the Li is the principle of heaven, the meaning of earth, and the right path for the people. To the anonymous author of the So Chong, who hesitated to give to the Li such religious attributes, the Li was nevertheless the regulator of the state, the guardian of the temples, the keeper of order among the people, and protector of the rulers here. It was customary for people to make estimations of a person with the Li as a criterion, that is, according to whether the person in question behaved or not by the standards of their Li. Sometimes they even made predictions on that person's fortunes, or the future of that person's state or army on the strength of this criterion. Confucius, being an educator, had no use for predictions or fortune telling. He believed in the Li's effectiveness in preventing crime and building up orderly habits. He used the Li to make the education of his students complete by giving them a balanced training in civilian and military subjects, the Li being the best course for citizenship, while archery and driving were martial arts. Writing and mathematics were skills which could help the students in any careers they chose. Confucius, whose expertise in the Li was recognized even by an enemy of his, was anything but a conservative. He knew very well that the Li, like everything else, had to change with time. The three royal dynasties, Xia, Shang, and Zhou, did not have the same Li, he said. He also said that the rules of the Li were not good or bad. We're on page 20 now. By themselves, they were good or bad depending upon whether or not they met the needs of a particular case at a particular time, and whenever necessary, rules never used by the ancient kings should be promulgated, if they were appropriate. Sun Yuzhang, 1848 to 1908, a well-known scholar of the late Qing period and author of 2 books on the Li of Zhou, had the courage to say that many ancient rules of the Li were just vestiges of the past. What mattered in his opinion was the spirit, not the wording of those rules. Those among us who wish to restore everything ancient do not really know the history of the Li. Ooh, my brain feels so relaxed. Interesting. There's multiple reasons for that, but we don't need to talk about that. Much has changed, at least in form. People used to kowtow, prostrate to each other. Now they bow. I gotta turn on the bigger light. I can't really see. I can see, but it's not healthy to. Oh, we got it. And the Lord said, "Let there be light." Anyways, uh, okay. And whatever necessary, rules never used by the ancient kings should be promulgated if they were appropriate. Song Yizhang, 1848 to 1908, a well-known scholar of the late Qing period, author of 2 books on the Li of Zhou, had the courage to say that many ancient rules of the Li were just vestiges of the past. What mattered in his opinion was the spirit, not the wording of those rules. Those among us who wish to restore everything ancient do not really know the history of the Li. Much has changed, at least in form. People used to kowtow, prostrate to each other. Now they bow. Land used to belong to the king under the early Zhou, with each farming family ordered to till 100 mo for its own needs and 12.5 mo for the king. What the hell is a mo? Now in Taiwan, it is owned by farming families. Ceremonies for funerals and weddings have also changed, and we do not have any longer. We do not have any longer a ceremony for the putting on of the hats, reaching the age of 19. But in the midst of all these changes, there has been one thing which has never changed. The one thing is the spirit, or in the language of Confucius, the pen. The spirit or basis of the Li is nothing else, it is Zhen. What can a man do about the Li? Asked Confucius. If this man is not Zhen, the Li, he exclaimed on another occasion. Does the Li mean just a bundle of gifts and jades and silks? Zhen is the spirit and basis of the Li, because all ceremonies become a farce if the men performing them had no desire to behave like men. That is, with true emotions and feelings, and with a willingness to qualify as real men as much as they could. This is why Confucius once said, "What the fuck, man? I'm still listening. Why you pause, YouTube?" God damn it. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Jen is the spirit and basis of the Li, because all ceremonies become a farce if the men performing them had no desire to behave like men. That is, with true emotions and feelings, and with a willingness to qualify as real men, as much as they could. This is why Confucius once said, "A funeral with a lot of display and not enough of mourning is not as good as a funeral with much respectful feeling for the dead, though not enough of display." And it is only natural for the sage to advise some of his students in the matter of some ceremonies. Frugality is better than extravagance. Oh, gotta remember to breathe. We're on section K, page 21. Man's mind, nature, and sentiments. Man's mind is like a boat's rudder. It needs to be controlled. Among all the students of Confucius, only Yen Hui succeeded in directing his mind along the tracks of Jen of 3 months in a row. Others could do it for a month or so, or for just a single day. Confucius admitted he had to be as old as 70 years of age before he managed to follow his mind's whims without violating the rules of propriety. Most people do not seem to know that they have a mind which may perform wonders for them or bring disasters to them. Fuck. They just ignore it. All they do is eating all day. Huh. Sang San, which one of the youngest among the sage's students, was destined to transmit the Tao to later generations of disciples. He discovered that the mind needed rectification if he wanted to make good use of it. Four emotions usually exercise bad influences on the mind: anger, fear, exhilaration. That's kind of why I cut down the competitive gaming, to be honest. Exhilaration. Worry. The way to rectify one's mind is to get rid of these four emotions. Once the mind is rectified, a man can easily change himself, his family, his state, and his world. For mind is the center of the person in question, and this person is, although he may not be aware of it, the center of heaven and the earth. Wang Yinglin, from 1223 to 1296, was positive about that. The mind could be more than the center of heaven and earth. By being the center of that person or any person, it possibly is also the whole universe, and the universe may be, at least subjectively, nothing but the mind of a person like Lu Qiyong, master of Shangsan, from 1139 to 1192. It can also be reason itself. According to Wang Shoujin, Wang believed no reason existed outside the mind, and no she, a fair thing, existed outside the mind. The mind is reason because it knows how to arrange things. The mind is also virtue because it has compassion. Jen. Jen and compassion, same thing apparently. Right. And the ability to distinguish right from wrong, the yi. All a man needs to do in order to find a right answer to a question is to search his own mind. His liang qi, I don't know what the fuck I just said. A good intuitive knowledge is there. This concept of Liang Qi Wang had taken from one of the sayings of Mencius. Mencius affirmed man was born with a good mind, which contained the embryos of Jin, Yi, Li, and wisdom. Because Mencius said all men had a sense of compassion when they saw a baby approaching a well and in danger of falling into it, and all men had a sense of shame, a sense of yielding to the elders, a sense of right and wrong. Now, isn't it fucked up that nowadays certain people would just laugh at that? I wonder if back then, if there's people like that. Is it possible? Is it not? I don't know. I don't have a time travel machine. I'm just saying, world is soulless at times. Mencius had elaborated an exclusive theory about the goodness of human nature, with such theories of his own and some ideas which he derived from the teachings of Confucius. In their nature, and it was the habits which separated them. It has been debated since the time of Mencius among Chinese scholars over the question whether Confucius ever said anything that human nature was basically or originally good. Hu Yanwu took from 1613 to 1682 took the stand that Confucius implied this thesis of Mencius. How could Confucius have said that people were not very different in their nature if he also thought there were men of good nature and men of bad nature at the same time? We might add that Confucius never said anything which suggested the opposite thesis offered by Junzi, the thesis on the badness of human nature. There is a song in the Book of Songs which says, Heaven gave birth to the multitudes of people, endowing them with both matter and principle. The people hold their ritual vessels up to thank heaven for good virtue they received. The principle thus endowed by heaven constituted what Zizi was going to call human nature. Confucius, when he explained this song in his class, told the students that, in his opinion, the author of this song might be considered as having understood the Tao. Not all the songwriters in the world could have said a thing like that. Goodness is the principle from heaven which permeates man's mind and nature. Man's nature is one, but man's sentiments are many. Sentiments are good when they emanate from nature. They are bad when they do not. Bad sentiments may also be said to be deviations from nature. Hu Yanwu had another theory. He thought both the good and the bad sentiments are emanations from nature. A sentiment is bad when it is either too much or too little in quality and quantity. In fact, Confucius also said something similar to Ku's thesis when he discussed why the Tao was not applied by people in human society. That good men are doing too much, and the bad men are doing too little. Faithful to this and other precepts in Confucianist ethics, the Chinese people have always attached much importance to moderation, the upholding of man's dignity, the development of man's nature, and a coordinated endeavor for national progress. Why does it play an ad after an ad? Whatever. I feel like they should separate the gap of that. Only have 3 minutes every hour. Or pretty sure that's what it's on. Anyways, back to this. We're on section I. Learning, knowledge, and intuition. A salient trait in the character of Confucius was his love for learning. He said he was never tired of it, and he was quite proud of this predilection. I didn't even know that was a word. What the fuck is that? There ought to be, he told his students, a man as honest and trustworthy as I am in any village of 10 households or more, yet this man could not be as fond of learning as I am. Li Kong, one of the students who admired him most, agreed with the teacher. Si Kong never hesitated to call him a sage, because a sage was just the kind of man Confucius was, gen and wise. He was Zen in that he loved people so much as to be always eager to teach them, and he was wise in that he knew the best way for him to get ahead along the path of the Tao was through learning. Confucius also knew how to think, supplementing his thought to whatever he had learned. At one time, he put so much emphasis on thinking that he almost forgot to learn, and then he found out that just thinking could get him nowhere. Once, I tried to think all the time, forgetting to eat or sleep. No use. I decided it was better to learn in the meantime. To learn without thinking leads a man in the wrong direction, said he on another occasion, but to think without learning is simply dangerous. Confucius also knew there were two approaches to knowledge. One was to learn as much as possible, another was to summarize what had been learned. Both were important. Confucius used both. But the second approach was a necessary final step to grasp the knowledge. Few people then, as now, were aware of the fact that information was not knowledge. Information is something there for us to read, look at, listen to. We would know nothing if we just read, look at, or listen to it. We have to understand and memorize what we read. We have to see and hear, and then we must also summarize. The way to summarize is to find out the logic, or in the language of the Confucianists, the reason behind all that information. He, the things, said Confucius in the Ta Shui, and get the knowledge. This word ki, or ke, had two sets of meanings. ¿Qué pasa? No. Anyways, to come and to get into contact, etc. 2, to fight against, to rectify, to get rid of, etc. Okay. Jushi, 1130 to 1200. Wow. How is that possible? You just went from like 1130 to 1200 like that? And the eminent Neo-Confucianists of the Song period chose the first set and interpreted this saying by Confucius as contact the things, study them in order to know them. Wang Shoujian of the Ming period disagreed. Wang preferred the second set of Ke's meanings and interpreted the same saying by Confucius as rectify whatever there is to be rectified. About the things, search your own mind and trust your own intuition, which is good by nature. Both Chu and Wang were right, each in his particular approach. Chu emphasized the objective side of knowledge, while Wang cared more about ethical practice. Chu, in his last years, did say certain things which Wang discovered with great joy, claiming that those last sayings by Chu coincided with his own theory about the good intuitive knowledge. Wang based his theory chiefly on the thesis of goodness of human nature by Mencius. Mencius in that thesis insisted that man by nature could tell what was right and what was wrong without being taught. Wang therefore concluded that it was not at all necessary to contact the things one by one and study the logic or reason of each one of those things. In order to acquire a knowledge for the purpose of the next step in the Pa Shui's program, make your will sincere. Page 26. The steps in the Ta Shui are 8 in all. Ke, the things. 2, that's 1. 2, get the knowledge. 3, make your will sincere. 4, rectify your mind. 5, cultivate your person. 6, regulate your family. 7, govern your state. 8, pacify the world. When we take these 8 steps into consideration, we are inclined to side with Wang, because objective knowledge about things does not seem to have any immediate relationship with a man's preparation for making his will sincere. On the other hand, if his views on things are rectified, such as correcting his old views on the importance of material success, that may certainly help him realize how necessary it is to have a sincere will. Cao Ponlong, 1562 to 1626, also of the Ming period, did a good job on reconciling Chu's theory and Wang's. Cao said to Ke, the things, is really to watch them one by one and from time to time and investigate them thoroughly. But when the things have been cared, really don't know how to say that word. A summary of all the logic in them will come out from our mind. Thanks to Chu's scientific spirit and efforts of our other scholars, China has not been a barren land for technology. Fact eloquently proven by Joseph Needham with his many volumes on science and civilization in China. Section M. Action. Neither Chu nor Wang believed knowledge was an end by itself. It was merely a means. The end was action. To Wang, knowledge and action were one, that is, two phases of a single process. Knowledge was the beginning, the motivation, the principle, and action was the completion, the realization and application. Knowledge, if true and solid, was also action, and action, if carried out with clarity and foresight, was also knowledge. True knowledge would lead a man to act all by himself. Chu thought in almost the same way as Wang was going to. A man who does not act, said Chu, is a man who does not know. The more he knows, the more he will act. And the more he acts, the more he will know. It is like mountain climbing. The higher you get, the more peaks you see, and you will want to climb still higher. Three well-known Confucianists of the Qing period, Li Yu, Song Qifeng, 1587 to 1675, and Fang Chong, continued the tradition of Chu Shi and Wang Shoujin with their deeds. They also made statements on the subject which sounded like repetitions of what Chu Shi and Wang Shoujin had said before, but were really conclusions of their experiences from a lifetime. Two revolutionary leaders in our times, Dr. Sun Yat-sen and the late President Chiang Kai-shek, also believed in action. They amplified the theory of knowledge by adding their own ideas to it. Dr. Sun affirmed that knowledge was hard, but action was easy, and the late president elaborated a philosophy of vigorous action, in which he said the best inspiration for a revolutionist was the passage in the commentary on the Book of Change. Heaven, the heavenly bodies, moves with strength, so a gentleman ought to do the same by keeping on acting with strength. Both Sun and Chang were imbued with a martyr's spirit. So was Confucius, who did something which he knew could not be done in the first place. Confucius urged his disciples to act vigorously. Vigorous action, he had said, makes a man almost Jin. Compared to action, speech had much less importance in the opinion of Confucius. A gentleman wants to be slow in speech, he told some of his loquacious students, but quick in action. If necessary, the gentleman in question would skip speech altogether. Confucius wanted to keep quiet, asked by a student to abandon silence. Confucius said, "Does heaven speak at all? Yet the seasons come and go, and the multitudes of things grow." What made speech worthwhile, in his opinion, was sincerity. If a man speaks truth and acts respectfully, said the sage, he can go anywhere he likes, even the countries of barbarians. If he does not speak the truth and act respectfully, this man cannot get around even in his own village. The persons Confucius disliked most were those whose deeds did not conform with their speech. I used to take people at what they say about themselves. Now I want to watch what they are going to do after hearing them talk. However, no man really could avoid talking about something. He should nevertheless make it brief. Whether lengthy or brief, a man's speech is, upon final analysis, no substitute for deed. Yin Fu and G. W. Leibniz, I don't know, were in perfect agreement on this point. Although they lived in different countries and different times. Section N. Have a sincere will. Improve your speech in order to show your sincerity, advised Confucius in the commentary on the Book of Change. Sincerity may be defined as truthfulness, honesty, seriousness, respect. It is a virtue which, says Makong, 1019 to 1086, the great historian of the Song period, told Liu Anxi to practice all his life and start by never telling a lie. To Dr. Sun Yat-sen, it was necessary It was a necessary attitude for a revolutionist, for without it, no man could make a determination to sacrifice his life for a noble cause. The late President Chiang Kai-shek considered it a moral force behind every worthwhile action. To make your will sincere, explains Sang Shin in the Ta Shui, is to quit fooling yourself. We do cheat ourselves quite often when we think we are fooling others. We do that because we have lost our heaven-endowed intuitive sense about what is good and what is wrong. You cannot be honest with yourself, said CZ, the disciple of Shang Song and grandson of Confucius. So CZ is the grandson of Confucius, unless you are enlightened about what is good. Suzy cared very much about enlightenment. From sincerity to enlightenment, he said, that is called nature. From enlightenment to sincerity, that is called education. So we have sincerity to enlightenment, and then enlightenment to sincerity. So like, if I'm enlightened, I need to return to being a sincere person. I don't know. What he meant to say was, some people know what is right and what is wrong because they have retained a natural wisdom by remaining sincere since birth. Other people are not so enlightened and need education. They need to be taught on how necessary it is to be sincere. Sincerity is necessary for many reasons, the most important of which is it coincides with the Tao. The Tao requires everything to be sincere. That is true. So heaven has to be sincere too. Heaven moves with strength, said Confucius in his commentary on the Book of Change. Otherwise, we would have no heaven. Nothing can exist without sincerity, explains CZ. The worthy grandson of our sage. Very obvious, indeed. Yet we are not always aware of it. How can there be anything if it is not really there? Similarly, a man is what he is, not what he imagines himself to be. Man is what he is, not what he imagines himself to be. I'm gonna leave it on that for a second. Take a little break. Okay. Oh, I wish I didn't have a sore throat a few days ago. I'm actually like, my throat feels physically tired. But I want to get this done. We'll see how much we can get done today and how many more days it takes to get this done. He has to be sincere, like everything under heaven or heaven itself. If he decides to be sincere and succeeds in becoming sincere, he becomes a part of the universe again. What has made the universe exist and move without stopping? Absolute sincerity. That which is absolutely sincere, said CZ, never stops. It acquires shape after shape, duration after duration, extensiveness and thickness after extensiveness and thickness, altitude and brightness. The extensive, the extensive and thick, namely earth, carries things on its back. The lofty and bright, namely heaven, covers and protects them. Duration makes these things grow and mature. A man who is absolutely sincere, consequently, can also cause things to grow and mature by his being there. He can construct the principal structure for the world, complete with a solid moral foundation, and is cognizant of what heaven and earth are doing concerning the breeding and changing of things. Professor Xiao Shi considered sincerity as the highest concept of Confucianism, which is not only a philosophical concept but also a program of training with strict discipline on one's thinking and behaving while being alone with himself. It is sincerity which enables a sage to participate in the task of heaven and earth, and any ordinary man to radiate his personality and influence his relatives, friends, and fellow countrymen in proportion to how much enlightenment he has regained. The more a man has accumulated within, said Chang Hao, 1032 to 1085, the deeper his influence will be on the others. The Tao of heaven and earth may be summarized in one word: sincerity, said Chu Shi. What permeates the universe, said Wang Fuqi in 1619 to 1692, is sincerity. With sincerity, one can change the world, pacify an enemy, produce a miracle. Without sincerity, one cannot live even with himself. He certainly would not be able to rectify his own mind or improve his personality. The rectification of his mind has been discussed in Section K. To improve one's personality, three things must be done: enthusiastic learning, vigorous action, and avoidance of shame. These three things can only be done with a sincere will. When they are done, one is near to the three principal virtues in the world: wisdom, Jen, and courage. The word for sincerity in Chinese is written with two components, one for speech, another for success. It probably means that which makes speech a success. Sincerity, in fact, would make any man's words credible. It would also make the speaker succeed in his career. Furthermore, the speaker, being a sincere man, will be able to help other persons succeed. Helping oneself to succeed is wisdom, said Shizi. And helping other persons to succeed is Jen. Oh my god, I'm yawning. A happy man who combines wisdom and Jen in himself is a very happy man. Happiness and the Tao. Oh, that's the letter for this section. Confucius was exactly such a man. Despite his many frustrations in his political life, he remained contented and serene. He lived in the Tao. The Tao made him happy. He knew his life was not in vain, hence his peace with himself, and he always had something to do, being eager to learn something new, and at the same time try to improve his personality every day. Therefore, he never fidgeted. With a good will to all men and women, and confident of their ability. Uh-oh. See, this is the problem. It's copyright free. But what if this plays? Does that flag me for copyright? Because the Tom's commercial? I don't understand. With a goodwill to all men and women and confident of their ability to become better persons, Confucius had unrelenting hope for the future of our species. Hope plus vigorous action kept all worries away from his mind. Personal ups and downs to him were like fleeting clouds in the sky. He hardly could pay attention to them. What he cared was not his own fortunes, but the going-ons in the world and at his school. He rejoiced at every progress made by a statesman or scholar or someone among his students. Students gave him a great deal of satisfaction. He studied in the company of them and partook their joy whenever they discovered something they did not know before. Isn't it some fun, he told his students, to review what you have learned from time to time? One of the three things which could make a gentleman happy, in the opinion of Mencius, was to have as students the best young brains in the world. And the students of Confucius included quite a few of these best young brains, such as Yin Hui, who earned the sage's full approval with his exemplary conduct, or Zikong, who later became a successful diplomat, or Sang Song, who was going to transmit to posterity an essential part of the sage's spiritual heritage. Sang Song was lucky enough to have his father, Sang Tian, as a schoolmate. We do not know whether they attended the same classes. Sang Tian, being closer to the teacher in age than most of the students, was also one of the teachers Sang Tian, had no use at all for a career in the government or the army, but would rather live a leisurely life of his own, with no harm to his fellow men, while enjoying his healthy pleasures, such as an outing to the banks of the Yi River, along with 5 or 6 adults, 6 or 7 boys, all dressed up in new spring clothes, taking a dip together, inhaling breezy air near a local temple, and singing songs when walking homeward. It's like Huckleberry Finn. Confucius told him that his ambition was the most laudable compared to the plans of some of his fellow students. It is very probable that the sage often did a similar thing. He loved outing and singing. He sang practically every day in his school and was eager to learn new songs from his students and friends. He also played instruments such as the 50-stringed set, so did some of his students. The school looked like a conservatory. Well, he believed in the effectiveness of music as a device to regulate social behavior and give a much needed release to emotions. He knew so much about music that he could discuss it on equal terms with the grand musician at the court of Lu. Quite at home with the symphonies, he heard the Shao once while staying in the capital city of Qi and was so captivated by it as to be unable to tell the taste of the meats he ate for as long as 3 months. I did not expect, he said, that the Shao could have brought so much happiness to me. The sage was happy almost all the time, with the Shao or without the Shao. Whenever a friend came from a distant place to see him, that would make him very happy too. Sometimes the meats on his table had to be replaced by vegetables, and wine had to be replaced by water. He would not mind at all. Poverty could not get him down. I can sleep equally well if I have to use my arm as a pillow, when the pillow is too expensive for me. Yen Hui, his favorite disciple, remained happy in poverty just like Confucius. Yen lived in the slum area, never had enough to eat. People were sorry for him, yet he was as happy as ever. Yen Hui died at the age of 42. Confucius lived to the age of 74. The word for happiness appears 45 times in the Analects. Alright, taking a little break here. Okay, I think I'm ready. The word for pain was never mentioned. The revered teacher and his admiring students shared a divine happiness together in enjoying the Tao. They all loved to learn. This love for learning distracted them from worldly cares. Once a dignitary in the kingdom of Chu, the Duke of Ye asked Si Lu what kind of man his teacher Confucius was. Frickin' A! Hey. Uh... What kind of man his teacher Confucius was. Si Lu took that as an insult and refused to answer. He reported the incident to the teacher, and the teacher told him, "Why didn't you tell him that I am, I am that kind of man who forgets to eat whenever he decides to do some serious reading, and who is so happy as to be unaware of the approaching old age." He did more than reading. He was practicing Zen and told the students, "It is not as good as a man who is fond of it. A man who is fond of virtue is not as good as a man who finds happiness in it." "How happy can a man be," echoed Mencius a century and a half later, "when he makes a self-criticism and gain sincerity?" 15 centuries later, two young brothers went to see an elderly man, Zhou Tianyi, and asked for guidance in life. Zhou said, "Try to find out the origin of the happiness shared by Confucius with Yen Hui." The two young brothers were Cheng Hao and Cheng Yi, or Zhang Hao and Zhang Yi. 25 centuries later, President Jiang, is that President Chiang Kai-shek? I don't know. President Jiang admitted he was also a happy man, because he said, "I have found my peace of mind in the theory of good intuitive knowledge. elaborated by Wang Shoujin and based upon the teachings of Confucius, Mencius, and Lu Qiyong with a perfect peace of mind. I feel I have nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to regret at, nothing to be worried about, nothing to be afraid of. Why can't I be happy? Professor Hurley G. Creel had a point when he used Confucius and the struggle for human happiness as the title of a chapter in his book on Chinese thought. Alright, small little break. Let's see. We're 1 hour and 33 minutes in. Feel like I've made pretty good progress. We're at about pretty much 34 pages. P, the middle way. The Confucian way is the middle way. The word for middle in Chinese is also the name of the country. China is called Zhongguo. Zhong means middle, and Guo means country. The full official title means middle, and Guo mean. Oh, did I just read that already? Sorry. The full official title of the Republic of China is Zhonghua Minguo. Unofficially, China is just Zhongguo. Westerners used to call China Middle Kingdom, which was an inaccurate translation of the two words Zhong and Guo. China was then an empire, not a kingdom. It is now a republic. The Chinese word Zhong has some other meanings such as center, central, just right, acceptable, etc. When used as the name of the country, it reminds us of the fact that in most ancient times, the state or states formed by the Chinese was or were in the center of many non-Chinese states. When used as a comment on some opinion or action, it means just right or acceptable. It was Confucius who first in Chinese history gave to this word a philosophical connotation, based on what he had discovered about Emperor Shun's political art from a study of some relevant historical documents. Emperor Shun would, he said, take hold of the two extremes of possibilities, ponder on them, and use the middle solution on a people's problem. Confucius also found out that the secret of Gong's success in the administration lay in his applying restraint and release at the same time by using the li for restraint, the music for release. A third source of inspiration was the oracles in the Book of Change, which emphasized the importance of the right time and the right place for a man who wanted to do something. Confucius used the word Dong for both the right time and the right place when he gave lectures on this book. Dong appeared in the commentary as many as 148 times. It was indeed very remarkable for Confucius to be able to pick up this word for summarization of a great deal of various situations and circumstances and indicate the appropriate attitude to be taken by a man in those situations and under those circumstances. He must have figured out the unifying principle of human affairs as well as the coincidence of different sets of logic. In the opinion of Wang Pi, a prodigy of Three Kingdoms period, Suzi had said something which probably caused Wang Pi 226 to 249 formulate his opinion. What Suzi had said in the first chapter of his Zhongyong was, "What is Zhong? It is the great basis of the universe." Zhong with Confucius was the middle. The middle was something which was neither too much nor too little, neither too strong nor too weak, neither too hard nor too soft, neither too stressed nor too relaxed, neither too heavy nor too light, neither too long nor too short, neither too strict nor too lenient. It was like a point what the fuck? Equidistant from the two ends of a line, but not necessarily so. It resembled more like the right place on the markings of a scale, which shows the exact weight of whatever is being weighed. It was also like the geometric center on a plane, or the center of gravity of a solid, something with three dimensions and weight. The concept of Zhong was Confucius' great invention, which reflects the depth of his learning and brilliance of his genius. He knew so much and was yet able to condense all that he knew in just a single word. A word easily comprehensible by any man in the street, despite its exceedingly rich content. It is susceptible to all kinds of applications. In criminal cases, it can mean appropriate punishment. In social relationships, it can mean order and harmony. In education, it indicates coaching and correction with normal behavior as the goal. In philosophy, it shows in the unity, the opposites, no need to create an absolute besides these opposites, because there is something in the middle of the opposites which is shared by both of them. For the convenience of discussion, we may review its 5 aspects one by one. Dong, Chang, Dong Chang, the right place. These 2 words were in the sage's commentary on the first hexagram in the Book of Change. They constituted an expression of admiration for heaven, which is represented by this first hexagram. Confucius wrote, "Great is the hexagram chain, a chin, Chien, first among the 64 hexagrams. Chin, heaven, is so strong and healthy, occupying the Dongchen place in the universe, the central and right place. It is the pure essence. Similarly, there is a right place for any man here on the earth, a place befitting his personality and enabling him to achieve fulfillment. A place where he can have no conflict with other persons, a place where he ought to go if he finds himself in a wrong one. And consequently, a right place, is not necessarily always the same place. It could be right at one time and wrong at some other time. It could be right for this person but wrong for another person. A gentleman wants to ask himself often, whether he is at the right place at a certain time, and a statesman wants to see to it that his country is in the right position, and that his people are happy in the places they occupy, individually and collectively. The statesman or the ruler should make sure that he is standing right at the center, no tendency or possibility of inclining to either the left or right side, and he should be in such a position as to be able to see all the people spiritually from above. His task is make right what does not seem to be right. A statesman should, in the words of Chushi, make right decisions on the affairs under his authority and listen only to the reason while making these decisions. He must therefore try to find fault with himself from time to time and aim at committing no errors in the end. He ought to get the best men in the country to be his assistants in order to correct the mistakes of the people and the ruler. To correct the mistakes of the ruler requires courage on the part of statesmen. A statesman who Confucianist often has to pay for this with his own life. A statesman who is Confucianist often has to pay for this with his own life. Wow. Many Confucianists in the past died like martyrs, yet they died happily, being convinced that they did the right thing. Most rulers need correction, because it is easier for them to commit errors than a man among the people or a man at his court. They have so much power. They are like the dragons on top of a mountain. If they keep on jumping, they can easily fall into an abyss. So he said, the oracle accompanying the last line of the first hexagram, Chin. Those dragons, like bad rulers, did not know where to stop. How could they? It takes a sage. Excuse me. It takes a sage. Confucius said, to know where to advance and where to stop, what is a gain and what is a loss, how to survive and how to get killed. Professor Liu Yiqing added a note to Confucius' comment. A brave man must be more cautious than ordinary people, otherwise he would fail like those dragons. Number 2. Dongho, the right mood. The word ho, in the Zhongyong represents the condition of a man after an appropriate release of his emotions. The release should have been just right, neither too much nor too little. It is like a good cry in the American language. A woman feels much better after she does it, if she had a reason to do it. By zhong is meant the condition before bursting out of emotions such as gladness, anger, mourning, joy, said CZ. And the chongyong by ho is meant the condition after such a bursting out in reasonable magnitude. Zhong is the great basis of the universe, continues C, while ho is the right path for all mankind. We may add that zhong is the principle, while ho is the application. Wang Shu, 1416 to 1508 of the Ming period, said, "No success is possible if the principle of zhong is not observed. No goal can be reached if the path of ho is not followed. The way to know the right magnitude for the release of emotions is to get back to the rules of the Li. The Li puts emphasis on restraint, allowing for some appropriate amount of release." I'm feeling like sleepy. Should have done this years ago. Professor Tang Chi-Yung developed this saying by ZZ into the following conclusion: all crimes have their origins in the excessive release of emotions. The way to avoid crime, or in the case of... Oh, what the fuck was that? That was a firework. Oh my god. I thought it was a gunshot, to be honest. All crimes have their origins in the excessive release of emotions. The way to avoid crime, or in the case of a gentleman, to avoid errors, is to be careful about one's feelings and to control one's emotions so that the normal whole condition could be maintained or, when necessary, restored. General Dwight Eisenhower, one of my favorite presidents, former president of the United States of America, believed that republicanism consisted of three parts: harmony, balance, and progress. There cannot be progress without balance, and there cannot be balance without harmony. His ideas were somewhat in accordance with those of CZ. The late President Chiang Kai-shek of the Republic of China, so Taiwan, eventually, thought in the same way. Things in the world, he said, have a natural tendency to get back to its original harmony and coordination. There is no need to get into contradictions and struggles, such as what the Marxists have been advocating. Sometimes contradictions do happen, it is true, but they are only temporarily, not permanent. Marxism is no match for our Confucianism, which has taught us that by having zhong and ho, heaven and earth would be in their right places, and the multitudes of things would grow. Zhongyong, the right application, the word yong, is derived from its radical and homonym, which means to use, to apply. Xu Sen, 30 to 124 AD, author of a 2nd century dictionary, thought the word yong and zhongyong, it also means to use, to apply, to use, to apply. By the right application is meant an application at the most opportune moment and also in the most appropriate quantity. It has to be just right. It has to be so right that no other alternative can be as good. Confucius himself acknowledged several times how hard that this right application was. It is easier, he said, to divide the world or a country into equal shares, or to refuse an offer of a high position in the government and a title of nobility, or to risk one's life by plunging into several shining swords. What the heck? Than to practice Chongyong. Chongyong must be the most difficult of virtues. Few people are able to practice it. It has been a long time since anybody ever did. It takes a gentleman to remain unknown like a hermit as a result of his insisting on Chongyong not to regret it. It is difficult because it involves a choice, a decision, a sacrifice. By choice is meant the man practicing the Chongyong should choose among all the alternatives the one which leads to the extremely good, not for himself but for the group, of which he is a part. namely his family, his country, or the world. If an application of the mean is not good enough from an altruistic viewpoint, it is not the right application. Another difficulty lies in one's judgment of the right quantity. I know now, said Confucius, why the Tao is not being practiced on the earth. The wise ones overdo it, and the stupid ones don't do enough. Do not do enough. Wow. See, even he seemed to believe. He's like, here's this concept, but he's like, God damn, ain't happening. I don't know. Maybe that's not what he thought, but reading that, I felt that. Alright, so where was I? And I also know now why the Tao is not being understood. The good ones try too hard to understand it, the bad ones do not try hard enough. Everybody eats and drinks, continued the sage, but few people know the taste of what they are eating or drinking. Yen Hui, his best student, was an exception. Yen knew what was the most appropriate, and at the same time the very good, among all the available alternatives. Um, and he would stick to his choice. The most appropriate alternative is one which conforms to man's sentiment, heaven's reason, and the state's laws. A man who decides to take such an alternative must be prepared to bear the burden of justice, that is, to take a stand and fight in inequity, corruption, and lethargy. For this reason, President Chang Zhang wanted his followers to study the book of Zhongyong, written by Sisi, and use it as a manual for vigorous action, a profession of faith, and aid to keep themselves constantly and persistently on the right track. In an article written for Philosophical Essays, Professor Ku Yichin indicated that an issue brought up by Irving Babbitt on the conflict between the notions of one and many could be easily dealt with by the concept of Chongyong. This concept recognizes the existence of many, but also advises the adoption of one. Confucius, in fact, had set a personal example to his students. He was free from four kinds of excessiveness: groundless assumption, dogmatism, obstinacy, and egotism. It was funny because I don't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking about how dogmas are, in my opinion, problematic. But feel at the same time something that was felt necessary in previous civilizations due to warfare and things like that. But I don't know. Not an expert. That's just a observation. It's an opinion. Number 4. Zongxing, the right did I just almost say far right? The right attitude. Thinking too much about current events. Literally, these two Chinese words mean a man who walks on the middle line of the path. They indicate here a man who is neither too ardent nor too reserved. Oh, this is my favorite part when he talks about need to I don't know, we'll get to it. There were among the students of Confucius some over ardent and some over reserved, ones who stayed in Lu when Confucius was away in the Marquis of Chen. Somehow the teacher missed them very much. Let us go home, he said, to those who accompanied him. Our young friends back home, who are over ardent and over reserved, do not know how to correct their compositions, writing either too long or too short. Mencius had a comment on this passage in the Analects. Confucius had difficulty in finding the right on the middle way. Once, so he decided to teach the over ardent and the over reserved ones as much as he could. The over ardent ones are eager, at least to make progress, and the over reserved ones are always reluctant to do any wrong thing. They are not ideal students, but much better than the so-called nice fellows in the village who, being shameless conformists, are hypocrites in virtue. Wei Yiqi, 1616 to 1686. Consider the over-ardent and the over-reserved as the defenders of the sage's Tao, and the walkers of the middle line of the path as the cream of the product sage's teachings. Nevertheless, to be over ardent or over reserved is not the best of attitudes for a gentleman. It is more advisable to refrain from being too ardent or too reserved and combine enthusiasm with caution. Ji Chong, the right timing, what distinguishes a gentleman in his practicing the Chongyong, said Confucius in the Chongyong, is that he does it at the right time. In other words, the gentleman in question attaches importance to the meaning, to the timing, sorry. The gentleman in question attaches importance to the timing. If the time is not propitious for a certain action, he would rather wait. Otherwise, he would get into the action right away. Confucius was just like that. Mencius considered him as the most time-conscious one among all the sages in the past. A great erudite in history as he was, Confucius was never circumscribed by history. He knew how good the situation of China was under the emperors Yao and Shun. Yet he also knew that that kind of situation could not be restored in his own time. Change is in the nature of things. Confucius was aware of this truism more than anybody else, being the first and greatest commentator of the Book of Change. We may give here a few instances from the commentary of his in which he emphasized the importance of time. On the hexagram, Chin Heaven, a gentleman is busy all day. He wants to catch up with time. Number 2, on the hexagram phone, Good Harvest, heaven and earth change with time, attested by the cycles of full moon and new moon. So should man. Number 3, on the hexagon, Ken, stop. To advance when time warrants an advance, and to stop when the time warrants a stop. That is a brilliant way for a gentleman. Ye would see a disciple of Chu Shi discussed the significance of the time element in the following way. There are two aspects of the time element. One is my time, the other is the time of the surroundings. My time is more important, that is, I should not get into action if I am not ready, no matter how good the outside factors are. Therefore, all depends on me. I make the decisions and answer for the consequences. We may infer from what Ye had said and conclude with the ancient strategist, victory can be assured if we know when we are ready for a war and start that war at the right time, not before nor after that right time. This is true in political struggles also. King Wen of Zhou and his sons King Wu and Zhou Kong, who succeeded in winning the support of the people, defeating Tixin of Shang's army and smashing King Wu King's final attempt to restore Shang's supremacy, were famous for the timing of their actions. They knew an opportunity when it presented itself, and they also knew that a good opportunity did not come twice. It is not easy to evaluate the proprietariness of a certain moment for a certain action. A man has to be well trained in many fields to realize whether at that moment the relevant factors are all there or not. He must take into consideration the personal element and the geographical element on top of the time element. He should be there, therefore, in possession of a profound knowledge in psychology, history, philosophy, and some sciences, in addition to a reliable access to vital information concerning enemies, allies, and his own people or family. He ought to know as much as possible about himself, too. Confucius and Confucianists after him were never reactionaries, nor were they conservatives. They believed in change, and they wanted above anything else to keep up with the march of time. They were, in one word, time conscious. We're on page 44. Now it's we're still on page 44 and it's section Q. To be a sage inside and a king outside. And making some good progress here, but I need a little break. Beat Hove, or however you say it. So good. I miss classical music. To be a sage inside and a king outside. To To be a sage inside and a king outside is to remain a sage without becoming a king. Such a sage was not a sage king like Yao and Shan. Yao and Shan were kings with the emperor's title and the wisdom of a sage. A sage inside and a king outside, like Confucius, was a sage with the ability of a king. Confucius never wanted to be a king himself. The most he aspired was to be a statesman like Zhou Kong in the government of King Wu and King Chong of Zhou. He would, if he had the backing of a feudal lord somewhere in the eastern parts of China, restore peace and order, and establish something between the ideal state of great harmony and the chaos of his time, a state of limited bliss. He had contacts with several of these lords, was employed by some of them in various capacities, but never had the opportunity of carrying out his political and ethical reforms. He wandered for many years among these feudal states and was criticized and laughed at by a number of hermits. Confucius could have saved himself a great deal of trouble and trial and tribulations if he would just stay as a teacher and forget about changing the world. Yet he had such a high sense of a mission. I cannot leave human society, he told the students who accompanied him in his travels, because I do not want to be a hermit and live among the birds and the animals. If the world were not as bad as it is, I might have stayed home. He did not return home until he was 69 years of age. What? He had only 5 years left to re-edit his notes and commentaries and put down a new version of the Chongqi. He accomplished the task of a sage inside, not the task of a king outside. The fulfillment of his dream to be also a king outside was left to his faithful disciples and their disciples and many generations of Confucianists since that time. Even today, a Confucianist would not be satisfied with being just a sage. He wants to be a king too. The way to reach this aim is to follow the 8 steps elaborated in the Ta Shui and mentioned in section 1 of this book, namely to kie the things, get the knowledge, have a sincere will, rectify the mind, cultivate the person, regulate the family, govern the state, and pacify the state. The first 6 of these steps, if accomplished, would make the practitioner a sage. The last 2 steps will qualify him as a king outside. A sage with the ability of a king. All Confucianists are meliorist. Meliorist? Meliorists. Lorist. I don't know. Like Confucianism in the first place is a philosophy which combines ethics and politics with politics. A good man, according to this philosophy, is not only a good neighbor, a good son, a good husband, a good father, a good brother, a good friend, a good teacher, a good carpenter, etc. He should be also a good citizen, and if there is a chance, a good statesman. To Confucianists, charity begins but does not end at home. Man is not just an isolated individual, nor just a member of his family. He is also a member of his society, his state, and his world. Politics in such a system is only a part of ethics. Politics should have no other considerations but those related to morality. An ideal government is not a government with laws and punishments, but one with morals as guiding lines and the li as regulations. Ethics is the principles, and politics is merely the application of that principle. Ethics is the Tao, and politics is the application of the Tao. A gentleman's mission is to glorify or extend the Tao, in other words, to extend the benefits of the Tao to more and more people. A gentleman should, Confucius told Tzu Lu, cultivate himself and make other persons feel secure. Tzu Lu asked, "Is that all?" The teacher answered, "Cultivate yourself and make the people under your administration feel secure." What distinguished Confucianism from Buddhism and emphasized application, while Buddhism and Taoism, I don't know, cared only about their principles? We may add that Buddhism and Taoism are, I gotta look this up. I need to get this right. It really bugs me. Alright, so how do we pronounce that? Oh, because Taoism is Taoism. Okay. Okay, where was I? What distinguished Confucianism from Buddhism and Taoism, in the opinion of Wang Fuqi, was that Confucianism emphasized application, while Buddhism and Taoism cared only about their principles. We may add that Buddhism and Taoism are being applied to by their believers. The real difference is that they do not focus their attention on politics like the Confucianists have been doing. A scholar should educate himself about worldly affairs, said Chang Yi. Someone has to take care of them, either Mr. A or Mr. B. The world belongs to us all. Its affairs are our family affairs. Zheng Yi expected his students to become sages inside and kings outside, too. Every Confucianist teacher was like that. Yao and Shun, the two typical sage kings, had always been the idols of the Confucianists. The way of Yao and Shun was called the king's way, or the way of good king. Of a good king. The term first appeared in document Hong Fan, which recorded a conversation between Ji Zi and Shang, Jitze, and then Shang, and King Wu of Zhou. Ji Zi advised King Wu to follow the king's way, which he defined as an impartial policy with justice for all. Professor John C. H. Wu pointed out in his book on philosophy and culture that Dr. Sun Yat-sen considered this concept of King's Way as the most representative of. Uh-oh. You need this Chrome extension. All right. Pointed out in his book on philosophy and culture that Dr. Sun Yat-sen considered the concept of King's Way as the most representative of the spirit of Chinese culture, in preference to many other treasures in Chinese literature and philosophy. Dr. Sun, in one of his speeches, contrasted this King's Way with the so-called Overlord's Way, the way of the overlords like Huang Kong and of Qi and or Wen Kong of Jin, and the period of Middle Zhou, which consisted in imposing their domination by force. The King's Way, as practiced by Yao and Shun and King Wen of Zhou, was leadership secured with persuasion, goodwill, and benevolence. Professor Wu indicated further in the article of his one basic difference between Chinese culture and the Western culture. Chinese culture, he said, put emphasis on inner development, or development of the mind, while Western culture cares about facing the challenge of the outer world. But recent trends in the West seem to reveal an awareness of this difference, and quite a few Western thinkers are now interested in directing their attention to the mind. It is indeed the cultivation of the mind that can give satisfaction to a person's most personal, most urgent needs. Dr. Sun was himself quite a sage inside and a king outside. Oh boy. How many more do we have left? So right now we're on page 48. Page 63 is the end of I believe chapter 1. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna highlight chapter 1 and then honestly probably just read the rest off stream, because this is pretty tiring and my throat's drying out due to the fact that honestly I smoke a little too much. That's why this year I've been cutting down. I know I have to. It's just depression, obviously a little bit of substance abuse, but it's not like I always want to smoke. Obviously there's a reason why I smoke, and now I vape instead. It's much more pleasant, but I also don't want to do that a lot, as my father told me a long time ago, which I mentioned in yesterday's 12-hour stream. I mentioned a man has to rely on himself. That goes the same for anybody, whether you're a man or a woman, in my opinion. But yes. Anyways, drink of water and get the next part going. People are masters. Are. Dr. Sun Yat-sen founded the Republic of China on democratic principles. He was inspired not only by the Western experiences in England, France, and the United States, but also and especially by the national traditions of China. China was a monarchy for thousands of years, but was never, except during short episodes, a despotic monarchy. Statesmen and scholars prior to Confucius had upheld the conviction that in a state, the people were masters, not the rulers. The author of the document Song of the Five Sons affirmed it, and the author of the document Tai Shi confirmed it. Three other important men before Confucius, Xi Po, Fan Wuning, and Qi Liang, said similar things. Confucius went several steps further toward the democratic goal by emphasizing the worth of man, the dignity of the individual, the primacy of Zhen, among all the virtues, the good sense of the common man, and the perfectibility of mankind as a whole. Let us discuss his teachings concerning nationality, democracy, and social welfare one by one. Nationality. Number one, nationality. What makes the Chinese Chinese, according to Confucius, is not location, blood, language, or religion. It is the Li, the respect for heaven, and the love for fellow men. Men. Which also is like humanity, because back then, mankind, humankind, blah blah blah. A Chinese is no longer a Chinese if he stops practicing the Li, stops respecting heaven and loving his fellow men. Similarly, if a barbarian starts practicing the Li, respecting heaven and loving his fellow men, he stops being a barbarian and he becomes a Chinese. What an interesting take, eh? In the time of Confucius, what we call China today was populated by many tribes of barbarians side by side with the Chinese. Some of the barbarian tribes were so strong as to be able to take over a few Chinese feudal states. Confucius, who was a patriot, did his best to remind his contemporaries and posterity in his revised version of the Annuals of Lu, the Chongqi, springs and autumns, with expressions of praise for those statesmen who tried to get the Chinese together in a common effort to protect themselves against the incursions of the barbarian tribes, of the dangers confronting all Chinese, but he never neglected to point out the necessity of treating the Chinese Sinicized barbarians as fellow Chinese. A Chinese this sounds funny saying that. A Chinese barbarian is one who has embraced Chinese culture built around the Li, and he spared no reprimand on those among the Chinese who violated the Li, stopped respecting heaven, and loved his fellow men. He called such Chinese barbarians. By the Confucian standard, we may say that the Chinese communists on the mainland of China are no longer Chinese. They are barbarians, because they have violated the Li, stopped respecting heaven, and loving their fellow men. No wonder they had to carry on a movement to discredit Confucius and Confucianism. Democracy. China had a republican episode long ago. Emperor Yao chose Shun to be his successor in preference to his own son, Tan Chu. Tan Chu? Emperor Shun, in his turn, chose Yu to be his successor in preference to his own son. Chongqing, that episode was short-lived due to historic circumstances. Confucius admired these two selfless emperors more than he did any other ruler in the past. Selflessness in fact, is a basis for republicanism and democracy. Selflessness, in fact, is a basis for republicanism and democracy. Another requisite for a democratic form of government is the spirit of toleration, a willingness to live together with the persons who are different from ourselves in religious and political ideas. Confucius told his students there are various ways in human society, like the many roads on the earth. Roads can exist parallelly, fucking A. And man's ways can too, no conflict is necessary. Look at the multitudes of things under heaven. Each of these things could exist with no harm done to the other things. To Confucius, the world was something which belonged to all men and women, should be ruled by all men and women. and enjoyed by all men and women. The world for Confucius was like the American government in Lincoln's mind when the Gettysburg speech was being delivered. There was no concept in the Confucianist system which corresponded exactly to the American notion of democracy, yet the fundamental principle of live and let live was not foreign to the thinking of an average Confucianist in China. Because of the teachings of Confucius, it may interest the Western readers to know that back in the 6th and 5th centuries BC, there was self-government in the villages and townships of China, and that Confucius considered the institutions of that kind of self-government as a sure proof of the predictability of the king's way, the way of the sage kings. The Chinese, throughout their long history, have been able to move to wherever they pleased, except during years under the despotic Qin Shi Huangdi and the communist regime today. It is of interest to compare what A.N. Whitehead said about the freedom of movement and the conditions of the Chinese people since remote times. Number 3. Social welfare. The self-governed governments in ancient Chinese villages and townships took care of many economic needs of the people, such as building of bridges, the pavement of country roads, of gravel and sometimes of stone slabs, the archery contests, the drinking fiestas, etc. Confucius, very much impressed by what went on in the villages and townships, concluded that people liked to live together and make friends with one another. In his commentary on the hexagram P, or pi, I don't know, pi, he emphasized the importance of companionship and advised strongly against isolating oneself from society. He told his students how important it was to have the members of a community helping one another like a great family, and that the poverty was not so much to be worried about as the big gap between the rich and the poor. The size of the population in the state, similarly, is not so important as the feeling of security by the people. The way to fill up the big gap between the rich and the poor, Confucius suggested, was to increase the production of consumer goods and put the natural resources to good use. People would become happier if everybody had the things to satisfy his needs, which is practically impossible, I feel, but I don't know. The ancient sages prescribed 3 tasks for their rulers: set an example in correct virtue, make good use of the resources, improve the livelihood of the people. Confucius did not neglect the importance of fostering a spirit of mutual aid among the people. In his exposition of the ideal state of great harmony, he said specifically that men should exert themselves without exception, but not just for themselves. Each person should do something for the benefit of all, and the world the world was to be shared by all. Confucius was the world's first educator who advocated equality by admitting the non-nobles to his school. His concept of equality went beyond the political sphere. In other words, he believed not only in equal rights but also in equal capabilities. His disciples, inspired by his teachings, were convinced that they too could become sage kings, like Emperor Shun. Shuen. Now we are on page 52. 10 more pages to go. Section S, Confucianism and the idea of revolution. Few Westerners are aware of the fact that Confucius was favorable to the idea of revolution. In his commentary on the hexagram revolution, he wrote, Tong and Wu, when they started the revolution against Che and Xia and Tixin of Shang, respectively, did it in accordance with heaven's command and people's wish. Che and Tixin were notorious despots. I don't know how to say it. Tong and Wu were their subjects who rose up and overthrew them. I don't know, got banished to Nanchao. Tixin committed unalived after, I'm just gonna say suicide after being defeated. Mencius, the greatest Confucianist after Confucius, was once asked by a king of his time whether it was right or not for a subject to banish his ruler or cause his ruler to die. Mencius answered, "What I have heard is that a certain isolated individual was forced to die, not a ruler." Tixin, in the judgment of Mencius, had disqualified himself as a ruler. He became an individual like anybody else after having performed despotic acts and was punishable like any other criminal. Confucius and Mencius were not the first ones who advocated revolution. The author of the document, Tai Shi, had said explicitly that a ruler is no longer a ruler if he oppresses the people. He becomes an enemy. This author also said whatever the people wanted, heaven would satisfy their wish. Mencius explained further how Qie and Tixin lost their thrones. They lost their thrones because they lost their people. They lost their people because they were alienated from the minds of their people. Mencius affirmed in the meantime that the way to become a ruler of all of China was to give the people what they want and refrain from giving them what they do not like to have. On another occasion, Mencius declared that the people are more important than the state, and the state is more important than the ruler. The two Chinese words with which modern scholars have translated the word revolution in English, '革命' originally meant change heaven's mandate, or change the dynasty. It was never, however, a mere change of dynasty. It signified a change for the better, a new start in national life, a return to good order in society, and a bettering of people's livelihood. Confucianists are sympathetic to Tang and Wu because these two leaders actually did give the people a break. There is something deeper with the Confucianists than a sympathy for Tang and Wu. This something is the conviction that the people know best what they need, and that the people are able to get rid of their oppressors. The people in heaven are one, thinking the same thought and able to accomplish the same thing. The life of the people, upon final analysis, is just a manifestation of heaven's way. Whosoever makes obstructions to the life of the people incurs upon himself heaven's wrath. Force is not absolutely necessary to overthrow a despot. Our leader of the revolution does not need to have a territory as extensive as the despot, nor an army as strong as the despot. Dr. Sun Yat-sen repeated to his followers that Mencius had said over 2,000 years ago. Tang had only a territory of 50 li, around 15 miles, in diameter. Wu had only a territory 100 li, around 30 miles, in diameter. But both of them succeeded in overcoming the despots who owned extensive empires. Wherever Tang and Wu went, they were welcomed by the people, and the people of other places expected Tang and Wu to go there too, and could hardly wait. Dr. Sun concluded revolution is a struggle for people's support with peaceful persuasion, not a contest of sheer force. When the people are tired of their despotic oppressors, revolution is an easy task. A revolutionist leader has to prove to the people, nevertheless, that he can reconstruct something new after destroying something old. T. Great Harmony. Dr. Sun, in his many speeches, often quoted the passage on the world of great harmony in the notes on the Li. Oh shit, yo, what's up? I can take a little break. It's actually good timing too. Hi, by the way, sorry I'm streaming right now. If you wanted to play something with T and I, let us know. Oh, I'm busy, but I'll stop by when I'm done. I got we're on page 54, we got to go to page 62. But I'll see you in a bit. And here's a little shout out. Let's see. Have fun. Alrighty. Dr. Sun, in his many speeches, often quoted a passage on the world of great harmony in the notes on the Li chapter on the evolution of the Li, which we have discussed in the section E of this chapter. Holy shit, it's a long chapter. He was also fond of writing this passage down on a big sheet of paper when asked by some friend or admirer for an autograph. What he hoped to achieve was a Republic of China in which the provisions of that passage were all carried out. He did not succeed because it was too much of a task for a man, a generation or several generations. It has remained an unfinished work to be completed by his followers and his fellow countrymen. There is no question that this ideal state of great harmony formed the nucleus of his three principles of national independence. democratic government, and social welfare. After we have achieved national independence, Dr. Sun said, we should propagate our ideal of great harmony to the whole world with peace and virtue. Confucius wanted the world to be shared by all. He and Mencius may be considered as pioneers for democracy. Although they lived over 2,000 years ago, my principle for social well-being is a principle for the great harmony. The ideal of great harmony comprised three major emphases. An emphasis on production, with the purpose of providing a job and living for every member of the community, so as to free him from unemployment, from want, from suffering, from fear. 2. An emphasis on mutual aid, so that no body will want to hide away his treasures, but would gladly offer them to the public. Nobody will want to stay idle, but would like to do his utmost for the public. An extension of the personal virtues of loyalty and empathy to society, state, and the world. Number 3, an emphasis on trustworthiness in international relationships so that each country would inspire trust from all the other countries and live peacefully with them, thus eliminating war once and for all. There is, toward the end of the chapter on the evolution of the Li, a sentence which runs like this. The world is one family, and China is just one person in this big family. Wang Shoujin of the Ming period was particularly impressed by it. In Wang's opinion, it represented the goal of our sage's instruction for his students. Confucius wanted his students to bring forth a harmonious, peaceful world family, with China as a member of this family. The 7 and 8 steps in a gentleman's career, stipulated in the Ta Shui, are based on this world family concept. And another example, in the notes on the Li on Confucius in his leisurely hours, it is reported that the sage told his students, heaven covers all. The earth carries all on its back, the sun shines on all, with no discrimination against anybody. This sentence is very important, because it shows clearly why Confucius advocated the ideal of great harmony. He believed in equality, not just judicial or political equality, but also economic equality and religious equality. Next section. Lineage of Confucianism, Section U. Page 56. Confucianism, with its 5 classics, has grown with time till the present day. It has been transmitted and developed by generations and generations of scholars, including the most prominent ones such as Mencius, Tong Qiongxi, 176 to 104 BC, Xu Shi, and Wang Shoujin. It was unfortunate that the classic on music, the Book of Tunes, has not been restored together with the other 5 classics after the burning by Qin Shi Huangti. The remaining 5, however, constitute already national heritage, richer than that of any other nation in the world. The sage's contribution in editing the songs and documents, simplifying the rules of the Li, rewriting the annuals of Lu, and putting down a comprehensive commentary on the Book of Get Change, can never be overestimated. There are, besides these 5 classics, a set of very useful notes on the Li, which is a good complement to both the Book of Li, now known as Yi Li, and the Analects. Next to the Analects, there is a collection of sayings by Mencius, and known as the Book of Mencius, or just Mencius. The Han scholars. Hey, who's reading this? Han one sale. Anyways, the Han scholars preserved 3 commentaries on the Annals of Lu, written by Kong Yang Kao, Hu Liang Qi, and an anonymous author who could be either a friend of the sage named what the hell? How do you say that? Tsochiu So Qi Ming, or a disciple of the sage named Se Xia. These 3 man, my Chinese sucks. These 3 commentaries are known as the Kong Yong Chong, the Ku Liang Chong, and the Su Chong. The Han scholars are credited with the 2 other books, one a kind of dictionary and glossary or classified vocabulary form called Iya, another an amplified reconstruction of the institutions of the Zhou government. based on fragments of certain documents dealing with the administrative personnel of the royal court of Zhou and an originally separate book of technology. Water break? Later, Confucius decided to raise the number of classics from 5 to 13 by including these 8 other books which were not directly from the pen of the sage. The 3 commentaries on the Annuals of Lu, the notes on the Li, the Analects, the Mencius, the Irya, and the Zhou. We must add that during the first half of the Han period, 202 BC, 9 AD, only 5 classics were taught at the government schools. To be more exact, let us say that it was not the first emperor of the Han dynasty, but the 6th emperor, Wu Ti, who started the teaching of the 5 classics in the school sometime during his long reign, 141 to 87 BC. Upon Tong Chongshu's advice, Zhu Xi of the Song period made a significant innovation by selecting 2 chapters from the notes on the Li, the Ta Shui and the Chongyong, and combining them with the Analects and the Mencius to form a new series which was, and still is, easier to read and study than the 5 classics. He called this new series the 4 books, and took great pains to add his own notes and the notes of a number of other scholars to the original text in these 4 books. Between Confucius and Zhu Xi, there had been a long line of the best teachers of China. Sang San, one of the youngest among the sage's students who wrote most of the contents of the Ta Shui to explain the 8 steps in the perfect gentleman's lifelong career. Cixi, I can't say his name, grandson of Confucius and the student of Sang San, who left behind the Chongyang, in which he developed with convincing logic the concept of Chen sincerity. Mencius Menko, student at Cixi, and great oh my god, how do you say it? Theoretician on the goodness of human nature, whose saying have been collected in the Mencius, and to whom we owe the notion of Ta Chongfu, the manly man, and also Shangxi Shangqing, a rival of Mencius, who insisted that human nature was originally bad, not good, and who, despite his deviation from the orthodox ideology, has been recognized by later Confucianists as a worthy predecessor for having expounded the importance of the Li and necessity of education. Dong Chongshu of the Han period may be considered as a leader and representative of many Confucian scholars of his time. He was responsible, as we have mentioned above, for Emperor Wu Ti's sponsorship of the Confucian studies in the government schools. Treated as a teacher and a close friend by the emperor, Tong lost no opportunity to make Confucianism propagated to every corner of China. His 3 answers to the emperor on the relationship between heaven and man, focused on educational policies, did more than any other official petition in the history of China to make the Chinese people what they are today, deeply imbued with the teachings of our sage. A contemporary of Tong's, the great historian Sima Qian, 145 to 86 BC, performed his part by including in his masterpiece, the Xingqi, Notes on History, a biography of Confucius with anecdotes about the sage's family, which he put side by side with the biographies of the important feudal lords and their families. It was Sima Qian who, earlier than anybody else, honored Confucius with titles of great synthesizer and most sagely sage. The great Confucianist after the time of Tong Chongshu was Zhu Xi, 1130 to 1200 AD, who synthesized all that the well-known scholars during the earlier half of the Song period had achieved concerning the elucidation of various precepts of the sage, especially the theories put forth by Changcai in 1020 to 1077, Zhou Tongyi, Zhong Hao, and Zhang He. Zhu Xi's most important contribution, besides his collected notes on the four books, was his new thesis on heavenly nature versus human desire. It was Zhu Xi, said Professor Chen Mu, who gave a new spirit, a new vigor to Confucianism. Another Confucianist of Song period, Lu Qiyong, disagreed with Chu Xi in interpretations of several aspects of Confucianism. Lu, however, fuck, it is probably not a good idea to play this, but whatever. Buy the book if you really want to know more. Oh shit, too many clicks. Okay, need a little break here. Another Confucianist of the Song period, Lu Qiyong, that disagreed with Chu Xi in interpretations of several aspects of Confucianism. Lu, however, did not enjoy an influence comparable to that of Chu Xi's until several hundred years later, when Wang Shoujin of the Ming period picked up Chu's was it was postulations and improved them with deep thinking of his own. The result is an entirely new approach on the questions of heavenly nature and human desire, and on many other questions. To Wang, mind is the most important thing. It possesses the good, intuitive knowledge based upon the original goodness of human nature. Wang also offered new explanations to the concepts such as ke, the things, unity of knowledge and action, etc. His life was a life of dedication and vigorous action, which aroused great admiration both in China and Japan. Many of the leaders in 19th century Japan practiced what Wang preached. In China, Dr. Sun and President Chiang Kai shek were among Wang's staunch followers. More will be discussed on this subject of lineage of Confucianism later in this book's chapter 12. Let me acknowledge here that other schools of philosophy in China were not without followings of their own and never failed to exercise some influence, large or small, on the development of Confucianism. Schools like the Taoist and Motus and the legist or legalist, and the military scientists, the logicians, the yin yang school, etc. The same may be said about Taoism as a religion and the foreign religions which found their way into China: Buddhism, Nestorianism, Islamism, Catholicism, and Protestantism. They all offered something which was absorbed by the Chinese. Next to the foreign religions, there was Western science as well as Western philosophy, which began to be introduced into China towards the end of the 16th century AD. Yet none of these various schools of Chinese and Western philosophy, various churches of Chinese and Indian and Western religions, and Western science have been able to replace the Chinese national culture centered around Confucianism. Alright, we're almost there. Thank you guys for listening to this. For being here and see this when it's highlighted. But appreciate spending this moment with me. It means a lot to me. Share at least this one chapter. Section V. A Confucianist Century for the World. There are signs that Confucianism is being understood and accepted by more and more people outside of China. Confucianism is not a religion. It does not therefore aim at replacing any religion. It is a philosophy of ethics and politics, not a philosophy covering all of the speculative and practical branches of thinking. It constitutes, therefore, no threat to any dominant school of thought in the West. It may, on the other hand, fill a gap in Western culture by its emphasis on the similarity between man and man, between one religion and another religion, between one philosophy and another philosophy, between one nation and another nation. The most crucial premise of Confucianism is the goodness of human nature. and its corollary is all persons being good in a similar way are not really very different from one another. Racial bias has no ground. The world is a big family, and the nations are brothers and sisters of this big family. Like Jesus, Confucius preached love, not hate. Like Socrates, Confucius was modest to the degree of admitting his ignorance. What do I know? He asked himself. Nothing. He answered himself. The only thing I do know, said Socrates, is that I know nothing. With Lao Tzu, he had this in common: a belief in the existence of the Tao. Despite their different views on many other things, Confucius shared the greatness of Gautama and Sakyamuni, and Muhammad. Two, not as a religious leader, but as a teacher who taught the average man and woman how to behave as human beings. In the opinion of Voltaire, Confucius had created a new learning for mankind, the knowledge on human behavior. It was Voltaire who, along with the encyclopedists, yeah, made Confucius a household name in France and its neighboring countries such as Germany. In Germany, Leibniz, I don't know, I'll say that. Leibniz? I guess it sounds funny. Made suggestions to the authorities for the founding of a Prussian academy modeled on the Chinese Anlin Yun, advised the Catholics and the Protestants to join hands, and expressed his admiration for the authors of the Book of Change, who had elaborated the arrangement of 64 varieties of the six-line hexagrams long before his binomial tabulation. Bertrand Russell, the English philosopher, summarized his impressions from a visiting professorship in China in the following sentence: "A civilized Chinese is a most civilized man." His fellow countryman, the noted historian Arnold Toynbee, Toynbee, had the conviction that the Chinese civilization surpassed all the other surviving civilizations. Oh, what a nice commercial. But I don't want to get copyrighted. Fucking A. This is why Twitch used to be cool. But then the ads help. Fuck. I mean, what I mean is like YouTube, Twitch, all this stuff. Like, it's cool that there's ads, but like it's so intrusive when you're trying to like just like educate people or just like talk about something. I don't know. All right, where was I? Bertrand Russell, English philosopher, summarizes impressions from a visiting professorship, something something China, in the following sentence: "A civilized Chinese is a most civilized man. His fellow countrymen, the noted historian Arnold Toynbee, had the conviction that the Chinese civilization surpassed all the other surviving civilizations and that it was the most broad-minded one. Toynbee also demonstrated the difference between the Pax Romana and the Pax Sinica. The former lasted for a length of time, was destroyed and never restored. The latter had its ups and downs, but always managed to stay there. There is no point, of course, to talk of a Pax Sinica for the Far East of today, or of a Pax Americana for the whole world like the one which had a flashy existence after 1945. What we do need is a Pax Globalis, supported by all the nations and maintained by all the nations, not by any particular nations. Such a Pax Globalis should not be based on power or superpower. It should be based on virtue and virtue alone. No country can exist without virtue. Dr. Sun Yat-sen had said it many times. Similarly, we may add, no peaceful world can exist or survive without virtue. What is virtue? Some persons in the Kremlin or the White House or the United Nations building in New York City might want to ask. A Confucianist would gladly reply, virtue is the opposite of what you have been doing since a long time. Reverse your ways, and you will become virtuous automatically. Virtue is Jen. Virtue is to be really a man, not a predatory animal. That's kind of the problem with Darwinism and like the survival of the fittest. Like, doesn't really work out. it's kind of like dumb. I mean, like, it makes sense for like if we were cavemen, I think, but we're not cavemen anymore. Virtue is love for fellow men, dedication to justice, and abstination from doing to others what one does not want to be done to himself, and sharing with others what one wants to have for himself. Virtue is modesty, willingness to learn, and eagerness to improve oneself, the opposite of arrogance, self righteousness, bigotry, resistance to advice, and the dangerous assumption that any person who disagrees with me is a bad person. Instead of calling the other person bad, a Confucianist would try to find out whether or not he was good himself. Even if he knew he was good, he would continue to improve himself, cultivate himself, make himself better every day, and never stop until he reached absolute goodness, which is filial devotion if he is a son, paternal love if he is a father, trustworthiness if he is a friend, mildness if he is a husband, etc. He should have before he cultivates himself completed four other tasks. Ke, the things, overcoming the temptation of material success according to Wang Shoujin, get true knowledge, become aware of one's own intuition in the right direction, make the will sincere, and rectify the mind. In the he should after having cultivated himself do the best to regulate his family, govern his state, and pacify his world. Such a complete program for the good man to fulfill his mission on earth, from Ked the things to pacifying the world, is to be observed by all Confucianists, all Chinese, all the well-meaning statesmen in any country. It is a program which embodies the essence of Confucianism and surpasses whatever programs for personal improvement or political reform that other philosophers have designed. In the opinion of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, founder of the Chinese Republic, Dr. Sun Yat-sen's three principles of national independence, democratic government, and social welfare were Confucianist in spirit. They represent a middle way between nationalism and internationalism, between centralization and decentralization, and between socialism and capitalism. President Chang Jiang was very much interested in the Ta Shui and the Changyong. He considered these two books as having a scientific approach. He also sponsored the Society for Study of Confucian and mentioned teachings at Taipei, and never missed sending a written address to its annual meetings. With his approval and upon the initiation of the government, with his approval and upon the initiation of the education minister, I just burped. Chen Lifu, the Chinese national government issued a decree in 1939 to assign the birthday of Confucius as National Teachers' Day. That's cool. Recently, the city of San Jose. I love San Jose. Hey, if you ever go to San Jose and this place still exists, there's a place called Good Karma. Go check it out. Really good food, really good beer. It's like vegetarian. They got like artificial substances, as like meat. It's so cool. It's called Good Karma. Just Yelp it. It's so cool, man. I love that place. Everybody should go there. Anyways, I got distracted. Recently, the city of San Jose, the county of Santa Clara, the state of California, and the House of Representatives of the United States have also decided to make the birthday of Confucius Teachers Day. So I didn't really know that. I think I knew that one time ago, but I probably forgot. Among all the teachers in the history of mankind, no one deserved more of this honor than Confucius. Earlier than any other educator, he believed in the equality among individuals and equality among nations. Earlier than any other statesman in any country, he considered the world as a big family with the nations as its members. Our world is badly in need of change. The way to change it, I was told by my teacher, Professor Liu Yiqing, was to change myself first. Confucianism, said Professor Liu, starts with the control, the conquest, the bettering, and the fullest fulfillment of oneself, and aims finally at the triumph of justice in the world. So let us all exert ourselves toward this common goal and share Confucianist experiences with the good people in the other countries. The 21st century may prove to be a Confucianist century for China and the world. And that's it. That was a lot. And the next part of this, which probably just gonna read on my own time because this is actually kind of tiring. That's page 72, I believe, chapter 2, philosophy of life. But just for the heck of it, we'll read one little bit of it. Section A humanist philosophy. The central topic of Confucianism is life. Man's life. This is bonus content. It dwells on the theories concerning man's nature and how to develop that nature. It is a humanist philosophy in the sense it considers man as man, with full respect to man's individuality and the equality among all men despite distinctions in race, sex, class, financial status, and physical strength. It is comparable to Western humanism in these aspects. A special characteristic of Confucianism is its emphasis on duty and a down to earth approach to man's practical problems in family, social, and political life. It agrees with Aristotle and Spinoza in recognizing man as a political and social animal, but takes man first as a person by himself and a member of his family. It is, let's pause for a second. Okay. It is chiefly ethics with politics as an emanation of ethics. This Confucianist ethics has been built around the concept of Jin, the applications of which are known as parental love, filial devotion, the respect of each other's privacy between a husband and his wife, friendliness between brothers, trustworthiness among friends, and loyalty on the part of the employee versus politeness on the part of the employer. More will be said about this Gen concept and its applications. Suffice it to mention here that no other philosophical system in Chinese thought attaches so much importance to each individual's functional significance in family, society, and the state. What Confucianism aims at, in fact, is a well-regulated family, a well-governed state, and a harmonious society to be built collectively and individually by those who, through education, are conscious of their respective moral obligations to this sublime aim. Innumerable Confucianists, since Confucius himself, and including Dr. Sun Yat-sen, have dedicated their whole lives. This aim, indeed, is no less than the common goal, the national soul of the Chinese people. Alright, so we're gonna stop right there. That's page 73. Next section is section B, Gen, a concept created by Confucius. If you want to learn more, check out the book. Title will be in the description of this highlight. The link. And what I have to say real quick is that I don't really run a script or anything. The script's in my head, I guess, if there's even one. But no, just kidding. It just kind of comes out like I'm pooping. But so what I wanted to say about that last bit right there when I read that, it's like, yeah, man, like I feel like as a Taiwanese American, who has like roots from like Nanjing and like Zhenjiang and like Fuzhou, basically, which is all in China, those three. It's interesting to see how like as a Han Chinese, then we have like the Chinese, and how Confucianism speaks about these different parts. About earlier we were talking about if you do something barbaric, you are no longer considered as Chinese, but you could be like just anybody, and if you do something that's considered as Chinese, now you're Chinese. So it's a very like, if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments section, but it feels very like nationalistic. I mean, he said it says he was patriotic, and when it comes down to it, like when I went to China back in 2015, 2015 to 2016, I went on a trip to Taiwan for 4 months. Technically, well, really, it was like probably like it was 4 months, and then in between that, for 2 weeks, I went to China to see my the family over there for the first time in my whole life. Something I've been wanting to do since like first grade, but I thought it was never gonna happen, and then I got lucky because a richer person sponsored us. So that was the reason I could really even go. We ended up paying them back anyways. I was supposed to work for them, but I failed to do that due to depression and other reasons. But anyways, I worked a little bit at least, and the point is that I could have stayed longer, and then I had to come back because a certain somebody in my life was addicted to hard drugs, and I was worried because on Discord calls he was saying things that was really concerning, and so I cut my trip by half. I could have stayed there for almost another 4 months if I really wanted to, but I came back, and it was better that way because I got to experience TwitchCon. I got to meet This old streamer I used to mod for, iHeart's Raptors, now known as Airlana. Um, and basically what happened with that is a lot of it makes me think about things, but when we focus on what I'm trying to talk about here. When I went to China, and somewhere within Nanjing or something, it was like the rural areas, like the farmland. My relatives there took me to this these farmers' house, and it was amazing. They treated me just like family. We ate, we drank, and that alcohol is really good. But I'm not supposed to drink alcohol because I'm bipolar, and I do really good on that nowadays. But in the end of the day, I won't be able to move over there or the other country because I love the 420. But the point is that what I'm trying to end on is personally, how do I feel about Confucianism? I think it's a beautiful idea. I think it's very cool, but I also think it's a little bit impractical. Like it's a little bit impossible. Even he kind of said that about the topic that like the ones who try to practice it overdo it, and then the ones who don't practice it don't do it enough. And yeah, but that's the end, and we're gonna end the stream here. Since I'll be highlighting this. Thank you guys for being here. Did this all within 3 hours.